Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order and document the time as 6:35. We'll rise for the pledge. Nobody to say. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first order of business here is the public hearing on a charter change, and this charter change is for the treasurer position to be, we changed it last year to be an elected position, and this year we're going to move it from a 1-year to a 3-year position for stability. I think, Mary, what this was meant to be is that in that change, we're going to have another article change in that we're only going to elect the moderator and the clerk at the town meeting for the night.
Right, at the annual meeting. That's where those two will be elected and the rest is Australian ballot.
Okay.
This will be the first year that under the new charter change that will happen.
But the 3-year term
Wouldn't go into effect till next year, or the legislature approves it, assuming they do.
Right.
Okay.
So this was just an opportunity if the public had questions.
Okay. Does the public have any questions? Okay. All right. So that, but that's out in the minutes and out in the posted. So if anybody has any questions about that, please feel free. Next item here is any agenda revisions or time allocation discussions. Any need for any items?
Just one thing, I don't believe, since Amy and I were not present at the 15th meeting, that we should be approving those minutes. Because we weren't there.
We had a quorum.
Right, you guys had a quorum,
Yeah.
you guys can approve it, the 3 of you, but the 2 of us weren't there, so my understanding is.
You're approving the minutes, not the.
Right, but my understanding was I can't say that those minutes are accurate because I wasn't there.
Okay,
Is that correct? Does that sound right?
Yeah.
okay. And that's fair, but does your,
We would just abstain from that particular,
from the minutes portion of the
of
consent.
the consent for the 15th
So we have
only.
two
We could just say I abstain,
for
the
the
2
whole.
of us would abstain from that and mark it in this month's minutes.
Okay. The only question I had in the consent agenda was the position for Jessica Tuttle that was listed in there. I didn't understand. It looked like a resume, but I wasn't sure what the position was. Not that it's
It's a long-term sub position.
Yeah, for
long-term sub.
For maternity
For
leave.
maternity.
Okay, okay.
she's
That's
covering Lauren Gilhooly.
okay. Yeah, I just hadn't seen the position piece of it, so, okay. So no other agenda revisions or time allocation discussions? Okay, the consent agenda. That would accept a motion to accept the consent agenda.
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Any discussion within the consent? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And as noted, we'll have Amy and Jay for not being at the minutes, at the meeting of the minutes of the 15th, will be abstaining. Okay, admin reports. I had just a couple of questions here. Mary, the PACs looked like pretty good attendance. I think you had 12 or 13 in the PACs
It was.
meetings.
It was
Packed.
Pretty good.
Could have been that
Thanks.
it wasn't as well attended as our first one. It was one of the coldest nights of the winter, so there were more than I anticipated, but we still want more.
Hopes for more, okay. And then the kneecaps, just briefly read, and I think you're gonna present them in March, but
I am.
turned in a different direction
They did.
this year, up to be
And at each grade
specific.
level, for the first time in a long time, there were no dips. Everybody went up, some grade levels only by 1%, but there wasn't that huge dip from 5 to 6. Sometimes our third grade doesn't come in as strong just because it's their first experience, and they came in pretty strong. So all of that just really helped.
Nice. Okay, and then the only other one I had a question on is the AIM SWEB or AIM SWEB?
Ames Web,
AIMS Web. Can you just give 3 minutes
So,
about what that's
it's a
aimed at?
standardized measure, and we've assessed all students K-5 in computation, and all students in grades 2 through 5 in both computation and conceptual. And what they tell us is that there is a correlation between a certain percentile, and they say, I think it's from the 40th percentile up, that 80% of those students would be proficient on the kneecap. So when we looked at our kneecap scores and the Ames Web score, we had way more kids proficient on the kneecap than the Ames Web. That's why I backed it down, because then they say 50% of a score at a percentage here and above,
Mhm.
and it still isn't as close. But it's with the exception of kindergarten, you go in, it's a group administered assessment, it takes 8 minutes in a classroom. So we did all of that, and now what we're doing is some of the kids that we would have thought may have done better and didn't do well, they're now giving that same assessment again untimed to see if part of it is they just aren't fluent in their math facts. And they are finding that some kids are more successful once you take the time limits off. And we've identified the students that aren't doing well either way, and those are the students that will receive the support in the math lab. And it breaks it all out for you, so it tells you these kids should continue in their current program, these students need tier 2 intervention, these students need a tier 3 intervention. And I think at some point you can break down even more, where you can find out exactly where those gaps may be in math, and then we can start plugging in. So you can progress monitor.
Okay.
It's just our first
Yeah, but it looked like there was a good correlation between its results and the kneecap. Now, whether they're here and here, but
Right.
when they move, it seemed like
It's
they moved
actually
together,
something
so.
that we may be able to start measuring.
And you can use
something
multiple
against-
times a year rather than your one
Exactly.
shot in
Yes.
October. Which,
And it's somebody else's as opposed to our own local assessments.
okay. Any,
I had a question about Leon's.
Mhm.
I was just reading and you were talking about the learning conversation, that the partnership held at
Right.
Burlington. And, it says the partnership is preparing for the next steps, including providing information to the school board, to inform the establishment of our ends policy.
Right.
Can you explain that to me, please?
So and actually, you'll see that there's something else I just handed out an addendum, but the explanation of that is that there's a tremendous amount of work that happened with the learning communities. A lot of information was gathered and kind of synthesized with more information added at the February 2. The ends policy, which you will need to create, really is taking all of that information and figuring out what does this mean in terms of ends. So in other words, you have a tremendous amount of information available now through the work that's been done with the partnership to help define what will the ends policy be. So that's what that was about. Just as a reminder, you've got information, absolutely take advantage of that because you need to be setting those ends as soon as you possibly can.
and I think in short, there is a lot of information on the public's input on the ends already that needs to be synthesized, not necessarily collected from
Right.
scratch.
You're
So,
not starting from scratch.
right.
Would you like me to explain the addendum? Because I just handed you an addendum.
Yes, you did.
And I apologize, but, so the addendum happened because things are rolling now with the Partnership for Change. And in consultation with Burlington administration, we, Winooski and Burlington, are going to move forward with establishing graduation expectations. And so, and I'm excited about it. I was wanting to wait until the ends were established and then create the graduation expectations based on the ends. I have no idea how long it's going to take to do that. And we've got to get those graduation expectations set. So we have a procedure, we're creating a process now with Burlington, where we, with Winooski, will have a team that's working on the graduation expectations. And at the same time, Burlington will do the same thing. They're going to take that data and they're going to have meetings and figure out what are our graduation expectations going to be, create a draft, vet it through the faculty, get more feedback in the process, and then and that would be done in April. So March, April, get a draft with feedback. In May, the two teams, team from Burlington, team from Winooski, would come together and they'd start talking. Where do we see common commitments to expectations? Where are there some differences? Is there any possibility that we can align and actually have one set of graduation expectations? If not, that's okay. If so, wow, that's powerful. And so getting all of that done so that by the end of the school year, we will have graduation expectations that have been established, understanding that, like any document, it's living. And as more information becomes available, it may evolve. But that will be, our start, and should be a really good start because we have a lot of good information.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and so then the other part of that is that in about 2 weeks, Amy Mellencamp and I are going to be writing a letter. It's kind of a thank you to the community. We've heard you. We've got a lot of good information, and we collectively, Winooski and Burlington, are committed to moving forward. We are going to do this. We're going to get the graduation expectations, and we're moving forward. So we'll create a letter that will go out as a public release and send that out. So Amy and I will be working on that. So I would expect by vacation time that will go out.
Okay. My view on that is thank you for not waiting for the ends, because I believe the graduation requirements you're going to come up with and the ends that we will come up with, though potentially done in a parallel path, are going to come together, and one or the other may need some fine tuning, but I don't think you're going to waste any of your effort.
Yeah.
I think, and Val, I'm not sure if that makes sense from an end standpoint, but I think graduation requirements are only one piece as we go. But I think us developing the ends and letting them move forward with the graduation requirements seems like the right thing to do.
What I would respond is Mary had asked me to be ready to talk about that. We're going to do a rehearsal around ends, and then what I'd like to do is take you through your policies again around this process to be able to say, what do you think about it?
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Perfect.
Great.
Question with a question. All right. Okay, good.
Question with a process.
Process. There we go. Okay.
And then the other thing, I just want to make sure that I have a chance to share something from Courtney.
Yes.
Because Courtney is not able to be here. She wanted to be here, and she's been feeling really, really under the weather. And so instead of sharing in person, she's going to share through me. So do you mind if I read it?
Does it need a preface, or do you want to just read through it, and will that be
To the public
the short answer for the folks that may be listening is we've had a teacher that's gotten a national recognition from a foundation out of California. I think they're $430 million foundation. They give away up to 20 grants a year to teachers that have processes that incorporate a business kind of environment. This year they only gave 8 out of 20. So they don't just give 20 because they can. And out of the 8 nationally, Courtney got one of them.
Courtney got one.
Wow.
So this
And
is
four of the awards were, I believe 4 were for professors at the college level. Things that were happening at that level, as I understand it. So yes, so
So
this
with
is,
that as a background.
with that as a
Go to
background.
Courtney.
Yep. I apologize for being unable to attend the board meeting, but I'm pleased that Leon's sharing this information with all of you. I was so happy to hear that you were interested in learning more about this project, and I wish I was not under the weather. I learned about the Levy Award this summer when I was co-teaching a professional development course on action learning. During this course, we hold the award ceremony for the student business plan competition. One of the teachers attending was recognized as being the first Vermont teacher to receive the Levy Award. I did some research and discovered that the committee was looking for teachers who teach about the free enterprise system using innovative teaching practices. I submitted an initial application, and the Freedoms Foundation quickly responded and asked that I put together a portfolio. The project I submitted was titled Small Business to the Big Apple, and focused on the success of students writing business plans. In parentheses, our students have won 5 of the top 12 spots in the state's business plan competition last year. It also focused on the student-run and student-driven school store in my classroom, which each year provides scholarships at graduation, as well as provides the opportunity for students to travel to and explore businesses in New York City. These have been huge undertakings that both the students and I have worked very hard on. In addition, the committee was also impressed with the collaboration between my accounting students and former state auditor Tom Salmon, and the documentary Merchants Bank did on my work with financial literacy. 8 recipients were selected this year, 4 of which were college professors. I was not fully aware that I would be competing with those at the collegiate level as well. In April, I am tasked with traveling to Philadelphia and showcasing the work I've done in my classroom, learning from these other exceptional educators and receiving the award. I'm really excited about this award and what it says for Winooski, and I would be happy to talk with any of you more about this. Thank you for the support and taking time to hear more.
Great. I can attest to the fact that when they do go to New York, they do not rest. They leave here at 6 a.m. on a JetBlue flight into JFK. They go to bed, I think the schedule gave them around 11:30. They're back in their room. They're back up at 6. They're back out on the road, and they catch an 8 p.m. flight on JetBlue back to Burlington, and they're back here at 10:30. So over 36 hours, they are sleeping about 6, maybe, and they are out in New York the rest of the time. So it's quite an adventure. So that's good.
Yay,
Yeah, I was excited.
that's very
Good.
exciting.
Thank you for the follow-up. Mary, I had one on yours with the and I don't know if the rest of the board understood the tax ID piece. You had mentioned that you had talked to the PTO. I understand also.
That is an agenda item
Oh, it is?
later on.
Oh, okay. I will hold that then. I did not catch that. And Rebecca, in yours, there was a comment about the fund balance transfers. Is this a change to what has been existing?
It's, I don't know if it's a change or it's an interpretation of the change.
They're interpreting it differently from the state.
The state has been having some federal audits at the financial level, and so now they're going through things. So they were auditing our audit, the feds, and they came back with a list of questions, and I had to answer and provide documentation. And the one thing that kept coming up was the fund balance transfer. While, you know, we have legal opinion that we set it up right, it's being said that we can't bind the voters for future obligations. So I talked through it with the people at the Agency of Education, and going forward for fiscal year 13, so this year, if we have a fund balance at the end of this year, we will be required to go to the voters and ask them what they want to do with the fund balance. We won't automatically be able to put it in the reserve account as we have in the past.
And at that point, would we put in options for things to do with it on the ballot? I mean, we'd have to give them an A, B, or C, right?
You'd have to say something like, there's a fund balance of $200,000. Do you wish one choice could be returned to the voters or returned to the next budget? Do you want to put $100,000 in the reserve fund earmarked towards unit ventilators and $1,000 returns? So you could kind of word it how, you know, give them different options.
And it has to go forward as an Australian ballot item. Do we do that in March necessarily, or would that be a special election?
No, we could do it in March.
Okay, so you'll be holding on to those funds for almost, 10 months.
Now, would it go into the next year's budget, or would it be returned to the taxpayer?
They vote on that.
That's the
They would
vote.
vote.
That's one of the choices that would have
It
to
doesn't, if we don't do anything, it automatically has to go back.
Right.
So what happens at the end of this year, for fiscal year 13, any fund balance that we had wouldn't be eligible to be used until fiscal year 15, because you don't have that number to start 14. So you,
Right.
when you went to vote for fiscal year
Year.
14, you would put on the Australian ballot, the fund balance was $200,000 or whatever it may be, and you could give them the choice, and they would
So
vote.
even if it was returned to the taxpayers, it would be returned the following fiscal year?
It would just lower the tax rate that year, or whatever the case may be.
Okay.
Or they could choose to put it in the reserve fund and earmark it for a project.
Right.
Okay, so the thing that's changed is the interpretation of the rules surrounding
Right.
it, not,
And they had, asked me to do it for this year, and I said that I couldn't do it for this year because we'd already made some budgetary, decisions based
Mhm.
on the money that we had in fund balance, so we do have a year leeway to work with it.
okay.
Well, and we were very careful to get a legal opinion on that very issue.
And I did
We
share,
did do due diligence.
I did share the
think.
legal opinion with them, but they're overruling it, so. I
So
had
be
the
it.
documentation, so we made nice, and I kind of negotiated a little wiggle room
Okay.
for us to work through it.
Okay, so, good, thank you for that, and we'll decide as we go along here, we'll know what it is in June, we'll figure out how we deal with it as we go through before next March, and it doesn't sound like something unusual on your end. All right, okay, so, anything else in the administrative report?
Yeah, I had one question, under yours, Rebecca, the facilities report. I understand we're getting a legal opinion next month regarding Hawthorne Field. Is Hawthorne Field currently closed?
Yeah, that was my question.
Because it's loaded with cars out there.
They're parking overnight, it looks like
Really?
long-term parking lot over there.
I wonder if the
And-
housing authority is taking this change down.
Well,
I'll
it's-
follow up with it.
Well, who's parking there?
I don't know, but they've been there since the
Cars.
snowstorm. There's big
Right.
piles of snow on the cars,
And
so.
maybe they made it, I don't know, but I will follow up
I
on that.
think what we had talked about was that is to remain locked.
It
period.
is supposed to remain
Permanently.
locked
Okay.
at this point,
So it has nothing to do with the school,
No,
and it's school parking lot.
yes.
so I wasn't aware of that, I apologize, but I will follow up on that and let you know.
Thank you. That
Yep.
was one of the,
How long have they been there, Jim?
They've been there a while. I
They
actually
got
had a member
snowed
of
on.
the public hit me up
That's-
on it, and I kinda went, that parking lot, I believe is
Yeah.
supposed to be closed, so.
That was
I
the
thought-
arrangement we had with them, so someone from the housing authority may have
Yeah.
done some, so I will follow up with that.
Thank you.
For bringing it to my attention.
Yep.
I'll send out an email once I know.
okay. And the only other piece I had was a very short one, I think, Robin, with you got the audit results
Yep.
back, and it looked to me to be positive based on the percentages, but can you,
Well, I wish it would have been even better, but they did the 3 Idea B grants, so one was a preschool and 2 of the other ones were K-12, and that was due to short staffing. They would have done more, but that still took a long time. They started the audit a year ago this past fall. So it took a whole year to get the results, which I got, I think I told you, in October. So when I got it in October, there was a disallowed amount of
somewhere in the 40K
around,
range?
I thought it was 40 when I was writing from home, but it was actually 32,644.
Okay.
And so then I worked with staff, spent time with Rebecca, going back and forth and looking for more documentation, and responded to them on November 7th with all the issues that they raised, and heard back from them 2 weeks later that they were able to knock it down another 16.4. So we are down to a disallowed amount of 180, which I think you did the percentage, Rebecca. It was
About 3.7.
of the Idea B. And, you know, one of the things, hindsight's always 20/20. When I look back now, it's like they audited my first full year as a special ed director. So the interesting things are the things that they've picked up on are things that I've already gone and gotten more training in you know, as I told you in the report, I'm doing another webinar. I designed a special ed manual for special educators. I'm going to put 2 more parts in that to address the 2 issues and make sure that we have more training for that. Overall, I think we were pretty pleased that we've heard awful stories of other districts having hundreds of thousands, so we felt good, but I still feel we have room for improvement.
Okay.
So right now, we're doing our second set of schedules, and you know, you learn to scrutinize things a little more and realize that basically every minute of anything you do with special ed, you're held accountable. But the interesting thing is things that they asked me about, I had to submit all the service pages of the IEPs and all the schedules. So they're asking me in November of 2012 and maybe the end of last year about things that we did in September of 2010. So you have to go back, and they might say, well, you had a 1-to-1, and we're disallowing 45 minutes every day because all it says is morning meeting. So then you have to go back to the 1-to-1. What were you doing at that time? Verify it with a classroom teacher that it was actually, you know, a literacy block, and it takes a lot of time.
Yep.
So I'm
be done.
hoping that when we get
We
hit
learned a
again,
lot.
we have learned a lot.
And we
We've
were
learned-
able to, one of the auditors that used to work for the agency is now a business manager, so we were able to do some networking with her and get some insight.
And on the whole, I wanted to say that the people from the Department of Ed were very positive with us and very, very helpful.
It's easy to work with.
And easy to work with, and were willing to try to, you know, help us end up with knowing how to do something better. So as much as it, to some degree, has to be gotcha, I felt like they really took the time to say, well, if you word this like this the next time around, and really be even more clear. So,
Okay, very good. Thank you. Any other administrative?
just glad it's over.
Okay, moving along, focus on learning.
Hours.
Leon, we're moving to, I believe, score results from
Yes.
last year.
And including this year's.
And
And including this year's. So actually a very interesting thing about this picture, one of the things, and it's more symbolic than anything and accidental, it's just because it's Mary's computer. So somewhere in the midst of all the things you see, there's a little speck of a star being born. So there's hope.
Well done.
That's a
Well done.
with that as the background.
With that as the background, let's begin. And I'm going to let you know up front, I'm not going to present the data in the way that you've seen it in the past. What I'm going to do, I'm going to start with grade 11, and what I'm going to show you is the 11th grade, a group of students as 11th graders, what their score was in 2012. That same group of students go back to their 8th grade year, look at the scores there, and then go to their 7th grade year and look at their scores there. I'll do the same thing with 8th graders. So you'll see them as 8th graders. The same group of kids go back, see them as 7th and as 6th. And the 7th graders you'll see as 7th, 6th, and 5th. I think we have 6th and 5th with that.
Okay, and a reference point, the reason for 11th to 8th is those are the only 2 points in time.
Correct,
There's
with the
nothing in between.
kneecap, right, so what you're looking at is kneecap data, what you will be looking at is the kneecap scores. But you're looking at a group of kids, realizing that there's been a lot of influx and a lot of students leaving. So that it's changed, but still there's some core that's the same. So there's a little bit of similarity, and we should start seeing some patterns there. So with that being said, let's look at, so this is now, you can see exactly, and where it says year rested, I really think, you can do what you want with that. We know it shouldn't quite be that. But you'll see, for all the students for the free and reduced, and then that group of students in 8th grade, 56%, right? And 44, which is actually interesting. You look here, the 8th to 11th, free and reduced, a higher percentage are proficient. And the number you're seeing is a percentage who are proficient and above. So 46% of the students proficient and above, same number, free and reduced, and for all the students. And then that same group of students back to the 7th grade and what the score was.
So they were.
Oh, and I was going to say something.
You know what?
For clarifying
I
questions,
can't read the red.
oh,
So can you just tell me what those
72,
numbers are?
I can. So I'll plan on doing that for each one of the reds. It's 72 and 66. And this actually is the same cohort of students. So it's 72 and 66 here, 53 and 48. Yes, yes. So you can start to see, and I want to point out something. If you look last year, 26% and 21%, the year before 29. This year, 11th grade, 46. And now I know there's a different group of students, but that's still at least something that we can say, that's kind of interesting. And that's a lot of an increase. Let's hold on to that, you know? Let's hold on to that.
So,
Ready? Oh,
really,
and I'm going to ask, if you have like clarifying questions to understand it, I'll gladly answer. If it's questions to go deeper, make a note. What I'd like to do is go through the whole report. And I think you'll start to see patterns in the report, and especially when I get to the end. We know there's all kinds of issues. I know that. I also know we're doing a lot of things. So if we hold the questions, I think it'll help us get through the report, and some of the questions might be answered in the course of the whole report. Fair?
Absolutely.
And this is just showing the same information graphically. The first three are all the students, and these numbers are the free and reduced. So it's taking what you saw on the previous and putting it into a graph, and not a positive trend at all. So you're definitely seeing they're starting a little bit higher, maybe quite a bit higher, as 7th graders. In some cases, in fact, in all the cases, there's an increase with the reading scores as 8th graders, and then it drops back down. Okay? So that's reading. In math, math is definitely not as positive. We know that there's a lot of changes that are happening in the math this year. And we're not yet seeing any big any big changes, no changes in the math scores. And so we know that that's a huge issue. And I'll say a little bit more about that later on, because there are things that are being done, and it's going to take some time. But, so we're working on that. Clarifying or
Yeah.
numbers?
Yeah. How is the 7th grade score in 2012 the same as the 8th grade score in 2011?
Okay.
How are they lining up like that exactly?
So,
Because they did on the last slide.
yeah, they did.
And the 7th grade score in 11 is the same as the 8th grade score in 2010. Is that just a freak of nature?
You're saying, which years are you saying?
Yeah. Top
So no,
line.
it's not a freak of nature. So the answer is this.
They don't
The
look
11th,
same.
these 12th grade students, in 2009, they were 8. In 2000, and here there were 7th graders. These 7th graders, the year before,
No, because
The
you're
year
going in the wrong
out,
direction. You're going in the wrong direction.
Doesn't that
oh yeah, I'm going the other way.
53?
Yeah, so the year before, these
No.
they would have been 6th graders.
2011,
No.
as
Right.
11th
7th graders would
graders,
have
they
been
were
6th
8th
graders.
graders.
Would have been 9th graders in 2012.
I'm gonna have to verify his data.
No,
Yep, they would.
2011, this group of students, they were 11. The same group of students were 8th graders in 2008.
Yeah,
Okay.
Right.
right. They would
This
have
group of students, these kids were 7th graders. You're right, it is something wrong.
Okay.
You're right. So I'll figure out what that is.
All right.
And I wish somebody was here who could actually look at the data for me, but I'm gonna keep going, and I'll have to come back to that.
Because it was the same one that.
Because there is something, because the same thing happens here.
Yeah. Right, and it happened on the last slide
Yeah,
that
the
looks like
same
that
thing.
too.
So, yeah. So, no, math, we know we've got some real serious issues, and we have some really amazing steps that are being taken. And I'll talk about those a little later on. And there's the math graph, which I'm not going to dwell on it because I don't want to.
Right?
You're all going to get a copy of this report. The writing is only assessed in 8 and 11 and 5, I think. And so we don't have those other data points. So there's nothing really to compare it to. Again, I do think there's at least some indication of growth at the 11th grade level as you look at the scores over the last 3 years. Eighth grade reading, and again, we're seeing, this one is a little bit different because this is definitely a huge jump from 11th to 12th, but the 8th grade in 2010 had really good scores as well. And this number, and I forgot to read it before, Jen, that's 72 and 66.
Yeah, I had Mike read it.
Oh, okay, Mike's reading it. One of the things I'll mention about the reading program, all students who are identified as having, being in need of additional remedial support are placed in Read 180 or System 44. But System 44 is kind of its own thing, which is much more, a lower level intervention. Read 180 is the primary intervention we're using. And that's for students in the middle school, but also at the high school level, there's some Read 180 courses. Students are placed there. It's not a voluntary thing. If their Lexile is low enough, they're placed there and they stay in that class until their Lexile is a minimum of 900, which is like a 7th grade, 8th grade? 7th, 8th grade level, the Lexile. When they're at that point, then they are moved out of Read 180. So it's an intervention program that's specifically designed to support our students who are needing reading support. We know that that's been an issue in the past. And I do believe that there's going to be, you're going to start seeing those scores going up further with that intervention being in place. And this is a little more encouraging, mainly because it's 8th grade, and you'll see traditionally it goes from 6th, it drops down some and goes back up in 8th grade. 7th grade tends to be a lower year. Math, the math scores are more encouraging in the middle school than they are in the 11th grade. And again, we do have other interventions that are in place for students needing additional math support, and a teacher that's really dedicated to doing that work. She's been doing that now for 2 years. And again, you'll see that trend, which is fairly common. Interestingly, with the 2010, it stayed on an upward climb. And the writing scores. Reading in 7th grade, and as you saw on the previous chart, 7th grade tends to be a year that our students are dropping. It's definitely something that we need to be addressing. And you can see what those trends are. And math. So I want to talk a little bit more now about the reading support and the data we have about Read 180 and what's happening. And define these terms for you. If in the span of a year, ambitious growth would be 100 points, and predictable growth is 50 points. And no growth is kids are staying fairly close to where they were when they started the year. So what we're seeing both at the middle school level and also at the high school level, and this is data now for a half of a year. And so we're looking at this data as 50 points and 25 points for ambitious and predictive because it's only a half year's data. But we are seeing that a higher percentage of the students, in this case, 2/3 of the students are achieving really ambitious growth, more than would have been predicted with the Read 180 program. A little over half of the students are ambitious growth at the high school level, and but in both cases, it's like they're either ambitious or there's not growth.
And this is the group of students that have been
Identified
identified that
as
need
needing additional supports, right?
for the Read 180 program.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're getting better at being able to identify these students, and we're adding some additional assessment pieces to make sure that we've got these students identified well, including some things that are going to be happening this year at the 5th grade level to identify as the kids step up where they are, so that we can be much more ahead of the curve about identifying students that need additional. And graphically, that's what it looks like. With the green being the middle school and the yellow the high school. Graduation rate, I don't have an answer for a question that was raised today. In looking at the state DOE site for graduation rate, for four-year graduation rate, it shows this number, 77.9% for our school, 5-year graduation rate, 82.4, 6-year graduation rate, 95.1, which is, that's exciting, you know, to start seeing the numbers, especially the number of students graduating in 6 years. And we do know that we have students that need additional years to really get those skills. However, we also received from the state a letter which said our graduation rate was 61%. And I have a call into the Department of Ed. I don't have an answer to what that difference is. It's not making sense because this is directly off of the Department of Ed data that we have for our school. And the letter was something separate. So I don't know what that is, and we'll have to figure that out. But that is the data that we received from, that we got off of the DOE site.
We saw this data last year. I think the encouraging thing for me is that the large jump between the 4-year rate and the 6-year rate, not in the percentage, but in the fact that the kids stay to finish.
Yes.
They are remaining to and that tells you about something about the kids that are in that group. I think to stay an extra 2 years to
I think so. I think so. I don't know enough about what these rates look like in other school districts. So I don't, it sounds good. I think it's good, but I don't know, again, how it compares to other districts.
A flat rate all the way down would suggest that if kids don't make it in 4 years, they ain't
drop.
coming back.
That's right.
That's encouraging that at
It
least they're
is.
staying.
That is very encouraging there. And then this is just showing the difference between a target number or percentage that the state identified and the actual percentage. And it is good to see that over in the 6th year, those lines are converging. And that's the free and reduced. The green is the free and reduced data. and the yellow is the other, all students. We didn't have enough of a cohort of ELL students to get any numbers on those. So a few things I want to talk about, which to me are very encouraging. In the course of the report, we looked at some of the highlights from the 8th and the 11th grade kneecaps. There are some indicators in there that are encouraging. This year, it looks like there's some changes that are more than what you would anticipate in a normal year. And that's encouraging.
And that's something that's not obvious in the final data, it's in the sub-reports?
No, it's evident in the reports themselves, any of the reports. If you look at last year's to this year's, you'll see that growth. Last year, whatever it was, 26%, this year 46%. Wow, that's a huge difference, you know. Something else that is encouraging is the writing work that's being done, and it's being done across all disciplines. We're working on that incredibly hard. The teachers are increasingly understanding how writing is a critical skill. It's not that anybody questioned that it was a critical skill. Teachers are accepting that they are writing instructors. They're teachers of writing, all of them. And they're feeling more empowered to do that work. We are working at this point to really establish a sustainable system for getting assessment data that can be pulled together to show student progress over time, so that we have a way to make decisions and to report out what are we seeing at the classroom level, you know, and compare that to what we're seeing in more standardized assessments. With the reading, starting next year, we're going to be using the DRP, which is it's called Degrees of Reading Power. With all the middle school students, at the very beginning of the year, we're going to be using that, and it will help to really identify which of those students need additional supports. And it'll be done early in the year and late in the year, so we should be able to use that to also show growth. Read 180 for students needing additional supports will show will on an ongoing way show the students learning. And that's great data. This is really more for students who are not necessarily getting that support. We should also be able to see their continued growth. So the DRP is something that's, again, very positive that we're going to be doing. Something else, and I know we didn't report on science. We know that we haven't had an articulated curriculum in any subject area that I'm aware of. But with science specifically, Dave White, who you've heard about before, is working now with the elementary teachers and with the middle and high school teachers, and they are creating an articulated curriculum. They're looking at embedding the writing. They're also looking at the Common Core and how all of those pieces come together. And there is a 3-year work plan that's in place that will be addressing this. And that is an incredibly positive sign. The last thing that I wanted to share is with the math. About 2 weeks ago, we had the opportunity to become partners with VMI, the Vermont Math Institute. In the past, VMI has been a math content training primarily for teachers at the middle and elementary grade levels. With the governor's initiative on improving STEM, really tightening up with improvements in science, math, technology, and engineering, there's a grant available that VMI wants to apply for to bring their content training to the high school level. And they want to do that by working initially with Winooski and working with the middle school and the high school teachers. They've bought in. The teachers are on board with that. It's a very, very powerful training. It's content specific. It really works to give people a deep understanding of what math is and how it works. And even teachers that have been teaching math for years often do not get the concepts. And so this digs in really deeply. And they've committed to doing that. They've also committed to taking that information and working with Claire early around best practices in mathematics to really accept and embed instructional practices that make a difference. And so between those two things, there is absolutely going to be a change with what's happening in mathematics. There is no question about it. And, you know, between those three things, Claire Early, VMI, and teachers that are embracing that, and it's collective, they've embraced this. So those are really positive indicators. So, and that is the end of my report. Now, I'm willing to answer questions.
All right, so in the first slides, when you said that was the same students from year,
Yes.
okay? So do you know if they're the same group of students, or did you have transfers in,
Oh yeah,
transfers out?
many transfers in and out. So it's not, it is
I
not
think that's
representative
important to
of
know.
just the students that have been consistent over that time. We tried to get that data, we couldn't get that data easily. That's something that would be helpful to have, but we don't have it yet. So it's really the class of students. The data that you're looking at, though, is the data only of the students who tested this year as 11th graders, who were also taught here last year as 10th graders. So excluded from this number are the students that came in after the year was done and were here with us this year. They're not included in that number. So this number is just the students that were here last year.
In the year that the education took place, that in theory
Yes,
was
it's called the
tested.
teaching year. So that's the teaching year data. There's also testing year data. That includes all the students who were taking the test. So this at least takes out those students that were not part of a teaching year.
All right, any other questions?
No, just a comment, on your graduation rate, Leon, you may just wanna looking at the state's data here, and the two numbers that you showed really looked like cohort completion date and which are two separate things. The cohort is the students that started in the 9th grade and went all the way through to the 12th.
Okay.
And then the event are students that were just in the 12th grade and finished and graduated.
Yeah.
So that may be where the mix-up is in the numbers.
So this is, yep. And I think, thank you for saying that. That's something, and I hope when I talk with Glenn at the Department of Ed, he can help me kind of sort that out too. Thank you.
Anything else?
The only other thing I had to comment is our math scores. It seems like over time, even though we might see some improvement, they're still gradually, if you look at your line graphs, they're always still decreasing. And every year, we hear, this is being done, this is being done. And I just
You don't
wanna
hear
know-
that from me every year.
No, I know this is your first year. I'm telling you what
Just to be
we've
clear.
heard in the past. And it's concerning because, you know, math is such a key aspect of kids moving forward for their future. So what is going to be different about this than last year's getting the extra core support? And I thought we had started implementing certain things from that, though.
That's what's going to be different.
Okay.
It's going to be a systematic approach to identifying both good practices in math, but also content knowledge. Teachers, if they don't have deep content knowledge, are not going to be as effective.
So this is the root of the teachers, not so much the students?
What's that?
This is going to the root of the teaching and not as much as the
It's-
students?
Yeah. Well, with any of this is about instruction. I mean, there's other pieces that can come into play. I know there's other complications. It's learning how to really teach effectively and empower students. So those are two things. The other thing, Jen, is this is a huge undertaking. And when you have a group of teachers that say, you know what, we're ready to do this, and I mean, it's all of them. There's a lot of math teachers between the middle and high school, and they're committed to this. So I think that's the other piece. They want and need to see change. They want the change.
Leon, shouldn't that include our science teachers?
Which one?
The Math Institute?
Because math and science are so closely related.
Yeah, and I think the answer is that they are closely related, but they're not the same thing. And
But
so
if
that's
you
why
don't, if you
Dave,
don't have a strong foundation in math, you're not going to be able to pass science.
well, right. And so I can see there's parallels here. But Dave White, who has been doing this for a number of years, is really looking deeply at how that progression needs to look and how we support scientific thinking through the grades from pre-K up through 12. And it's pulling all of those pieces together, you know? So, yeah, I mean, I have teachers saying to me, well, shouldn't all of the teachers get that math content? Well, I mean, at some point, everybody can't do everything.
And I
Yeah.
agree with that, but if you have a student that's in, IXL math, who's, struggling with basic multiplication and whatnot, can't very well go into science class and do formulas
Right.
I
to
think
explain
based on,
acceleration.
It's
and-
all the work,
But
it's all the work we're doing though, Amy. It's
I-
looking at all those
I think
pieces.
though, based on what you've presented, I understand the comments. I think we need to move. We're certainly not gonna resolve it here.
I
really
have
think-
one more question, actually. So, all of this together, how are you planning on evaluating this? The 3 Ps, personnel, programming, and professional development, because they're all tied into this.
Mhm.
And we've found in the past that waiting till the end of this thing and kind of crossing our fingers for student outcomes
Right.
has really not been helpful or effective.
Right.
So what is your ongoing method you're going to use to evaluate the effectiveness of this and make changes if they need to be made?
I'm gonna try to give you an answer. I'm not sure it's going to be a great answer.
Sure.
One of the responsibilities that I have is to be getting feedback on an ongoing basis. And I'm working with consultants to make sure that we're getting that data, realizing that there's all kinds of changes going on. So with writing, we are now at the point of saying we've got to get that data, we've got to pull it together. The science consultant, and we're doing that. The science consultant is also building in, and I think those of you who've been involved in the science conversations, there's also the conversations around how are we going to be able to show growth over time so that we know how this is working with our students. So embedded within the professional development is an ongoing, I'll call it formative assessment, but also other kinds of more of assessments that are built into this as well. So that is being done as part of the training, as part of the work that is being done. Read 180. We've got data about Read 180. It's no longer a question. Are we seeing growth over time? Yeah, we've got data that's showing that. At any point in time, I can go to Read 180 and I can talk to a student and I can say, hey, can you show me how you're doing? How are you progressing? And they can go, they can pull out their information and it will show, here's how my Lexiles changed from the beginning of the year till now. So we have ways that those are being built in. People are aware that we need to provide that data. People are very cognizantly aware that the school board has a need to see that it's working. Now, you're not going to see that on a month-to-month basis, but as we do our reporting on the monitoring reports, what is our progress over time? Those are questions that they should be answered in the report. You should be able to see progress over time or be asking questions about what's going on, why are we not seeing that, and that's all part of the progress monitoring. For teachers, for administrators, it's the formative assessment and really being able to measure and use data to inform improving our instruction for the kids too. Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay, into section 7, the public comments, general public, I think. No? James, anything from the WEA? Okay. And student council, I don't see. Then we'll move on to section 8 here with the second readings of the policy governance, the board management delegation for the 3s and the governance process, the 4s. I guess taking the 3s, the board management delegation first. Any items of any items in there that come to the
Taking
top?
the 3s first.
I want to take the 3. I don't want to do the 3s and the 4s unless there's any, just in case there's anything within. So the I only had one question within the section of the 3s, and that was in and on page 4. If you open up Sandy's page numbered one, Sandy, thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
The formal evaluation, it's in section 7. I think, yes. It says superintendent remuneration will be decided after the formal evaluation no later than the month of September.
Can you give me a number?
Number 3.4.7 on page 4. I guess my question is September the right time in there? I think we had this discussion when we first talked about this, in that just the timing with the school year and a contract year. I thought we had taken that back to the end of the previous school year, so it will be for the full year following. And is June the right place to put that? I guess I don't know that that's not too late.
I would almost think August. You might say June.
I was gonna say, if we do it August, you're still 2 months into the contract year.
Right.
So I would think we'd wanna have that. Am I misreading this, Val? In the timing of this? I would think you'd wanna do that before the end of the contract cycle in June.
I think what this is doing is allowing you that it's no later than September, but it doesn't mean that you can do it, you can't do it any other time.
Okay.
And in fact, policy governance moves you to a very different a superintendent evaluation process.
Right, an ongoing one.
It's an ongoing
month to
one.
month rather
Yep.
than, right. Okay. So I guess the no later than September covers me, so I'm okay with that. Okay, good. Any other thoughts
I guess as we approve this, I'm seeing in here under the section 4s in between, maybe that's 3.
I got a lot of questions on 4 with regard to the policies in and out. There were 3 or 4 of them, or more than that. But we'll touch on those in a second.
Are we on 4s?
No, 3s.
threes.
Threes
we're
right
on
now.
threes.
Yeah.
I'm
So
sorry.
really want to concentrate first on the global governance and management.
Then I guess I have a question about the annual agenda.
Yep.
So
Section.
if we approve this, is that pursuant to us sitting down and having a rich conversation of where everything's gonna fall on this annual agenda? Because it doesn't really tell us what months these are gonna fall in.
Under the board chair roles is developing that annual agenda, and there are certain things you need to have in there up front. So I would envision setting that up with the help of somebody, and then bringing it back to the board to cover it and make sure it covers the things that we need it to cover in the timing we need it to cover. Now, if you set something up for October and you have something else you want to insert in October, you can
Right.
always have that latitude.
And-
But at least with the annual one, you know you get everything covered. up
And the
front.
other question I had, just what does the term internal mean?
Where is it used?
In that same agenda, it says frequency is say annually, but then it says the method is internal, define internal. Is that a progress monitoring from the superintendent? Is that direct observation from the board? What is it?
So this again is a table on page 5.
Yeah, so what you're talking about is the annual monitoring schedule,
Right?
which is this piece.
Okay.
Whenever, you can move it wherever you want. But generally, when you see internal, it means that the board is responsible for it.
Okay.
So if you're looking at global executive constraints, then the board will develop its own process and, in fact, developing that monitoring report, because that is not the superintendent's work.
Oh, okay.
So it's internal to the board.
I should know that. Yeah, now I understand what you're
Yep.
saying. Okay.
So all of the ones here are, the global executive constraint is actually the global, it is the executive limitation. So you are gonna do that, but all of these are saying that the superintendent will produce these. Okay, because what you're doing is telling the superintendent when he or she needs to produce these monitoring reports for you.
Okay.
And most people do all of the ones except the financial conditions, which is also a state requirement many times to have an external audit. That's the superintendent's responsibility to produce those. So that's what internal means.
Okay.
There are 3 ways: internal, direct inspection, and external. Direct inspection means the board does it.
Okay.
And you can set this up and actually you can determine, all right, we're gonna set this up this year, but I know boards set this calendar up annually.
Right.
Sometimes based on they put an ambitious agenda out. There are other times that they want to learn how to do it, so they may have some policies that are not monitored the first year. But that's communicated up front.
Or you can move them around during the
Yeah.
year as something comes up, like our superintendent was applying for the Secretary of Education. So we decided we should look at the emergency superintendent succession. That we should monitor that before he left. So you can do that kind of thing. It doesn't have to be, it's not set in stone.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else in section, in the 3s? Okay. These are on the agenda together, so I'll skip then into the 4s and see. This is the governance process, global governance commitment here. I want to take on the discussion of the sections that are for consideration only as a second pass. I'll take those that are recommended first, and any clarification that might want on those. Any
4.0.
4.0, okay, right off the
Okay.
head, yeah?
Yep, on behalf of the city of Winooski, it is to see to it that the Winooski School District. We needed that after it.
Yeah, I guess one of my overriding comments reading down through this was someone to edit for grammar.
Yeah.
And do that after, because I got down through it and I said I can't write these down, and I don't think it was intended to be deeply edited. So I think for those, I think we'll just have somebody go down through. Maybe that's a good job for one of Mr. Litt's classes. Go down and edit through for grammar. But yep, there were a few of those.
Can we just go down the list, Mike?
Go down a list of what?
Of each one of these?
I suppose we can.
I mean, it's just some of them I think we can zip through, but other ones there may be some more. You know what I'm saying? There may be some more discussion. And I have no problem with the grammatical stuff.
So this is a second reading now. We've already been through these once.
Right, but
So-
I'm still up in the air now, second reading, and I'm still seeing policies for consideration only, and I asked the question before, are these ones we're going to adopt, or are we
Right,
not?
and that's what I think I wanna take as a section. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of them that I think are for consideration. I don't know that we nailed that down the first time as to whether we had cleaned those out or not. Was your understanding or your thought that we had?
I don't remember any, I wasn't there for the first reading,
Oh, okay.
so I don't,
Okay, so let's go
recall
down
any
through for
part
the
of that conversation, do
consideration
you?
only items.
Yep.
4.3 is that all right? Just the
Yes,
consideration?
yeah,
Okay,
let's
perfect.
do
That's what
that.
I wanted to do is those. 4.3 is handling of operational complaints. I know we have a policy currently about that, and it is laid out pretty much in this fashion. I would vote that we keep that one in.
Keep this one.
4.3, keep it in for operational complaints. It just outlines
I guess
Time
the only thing I would add to this is everything about this policy talks about a board member receiving a complaint.
Mhm.
And that infers that there's another individual always involved in this. And it doesn't talk about anything about should a board member become aware, because there are other ways to become aware other than receiving a public complaint.
Right, but if it's internal, that's
I mean,
dealt
is
with
that
internally.
handled differently, an internal one? How does that work?
I'm not clear.
So I think what the comment is this policy deals with items that come to a board member's attention rather than potentially running its course through the proper
Right.
channels in the district.
Right,
I think Jay's question is, should this contain something about those that do move through the system? And I think if they're following the right protocol, I would argue we shouldn't know about them, nor do we need to. If they get to the level of the board, it would be better for us not to understand that they've been taking place, because if
Right.
you know the background, you're probably either gonna go try to find information which will bias you, so that's.
yeah,
kind
I
of
think
my-
the piece that I would say is, this is defining the board's role.
Okay.
And remember, this is about how the board will behave, and it deals with the ends. All of the means you've defined in executive limitations.
So I have another question.
Yeah, and I said,
So-
so I think in 4.3, go ahead, Bob.
So the
Sorry.
piece is, if it is of sufficient size or of an issue that the board should know about it, because it may come their way,
Right.
where in policy does that get spoken to?
The
Not
board
leaving the
shall
board-
not be uninformed
That's
or
right.
unsupported in its work.
That's right, so that's
I have
2.8.
I have another question. So anything that talks about means or internal protocols, like here, it talks
Right.
about, it says, the board member shall inquire if a proper internal communication protocol for registering concerns has been followed. So the minute this policy is enacted, the superintendent needs to immediately establish that protocol.
Right.
Whatever that protocol is.
And
That's
I
right.
think it's in the policy we've got now that would then, those pieces would become procedure.
That's right, and
But whatever.
yeah,
procedure
what will
that
end
might
up
need to be.
happening is many of those policies that have been enacted just will naturally become a procedure that gets rolled into what.
Okay.
So, and this also talks about failure on the board, the superintendent shall not fail to communicate to the public and parents. So that's in treatment of staff, or
Right.
treatment of parents and students. So there is they lay over each other. Okay.
Okay. So 4.3 in,
Yeah.
board in, okay. 4.4 is.
I want to
handled-
just do a quick thing. So
Sorry.
what happens if there's not a policy from a board member's perspective, based
Or-
on this policy?
Or a procedure,
Or
you're
a
saying?
procedure?
Then the superintendent's out of compliance.
What does it say you do?
Nothing.
Well, you're saying if there's not an internal procedure,
Yeah,
then the superintendent's out of compliance with that policy.
okay,
'Cause
but
it
what
says
else?
there shall be one.
Yeah, but what else? What's the board's role?
Make sure you have the policy.
They make sure they have the policy, what else?
I guess you've lost me.
What does it read? What's the policy say? What's 4.3.1 say?
Shall take no further action.
Right.
If not, the
Solid.
individual shall be directed to the appropriate person. And who is the appropriate person?
Superintendent.
Yeah. Okay? So one of the things that can happen is you can say to the superintendent, I need to see that, but you don't go and fix it.
Don't judge the issue.
You
judge
don't
the
start
process.
taking the issue over. You tell the person, you go to the superintendent, and you take no further action as it relates to the complaint. Now, you're welcome to say, can you show me what the policy, what your procedure is? But it does not mean the board can go in and fix it
Right.
and take the complaint.
All right.
Val, so if that 4.3 isn't in there, then it ends at the superintendent and the person has no option to ever bring it in front of the board?
Read the policy.
It says it can, they can.
Read through.
It's all in there.
The board member shall not offer any evaluative comments. If the internal protocol has been followed and the concern has not been resolved, the board member you're going to explain, we've given that over.
But what I'm saying, if we didn't add 4.3,
Yep.
we decided we don't want that, then it ends at Mary. Well, it ends at the superintendent.
There isn't a
Good
protocol.
number
No.
4.
It leaves a little too fuzzy the protocol for the board's perspective on.
It's giving the board permission to handle those things, and
No, it isn't.
it's not.
No,
It's saying that it rests at the superintendent's level.
Right.
And people have added this because many school boards believe their role is to handle complaints, or this really makes it clear you have a complaint policy that allows board members to either start with you or end with you, or start anywhere in the process. What this is beginning to say and lay out, it's probably the most delicate piece for board members to deal with, which is, we know you have a complaint, but the way that's going to get resolved is in the school itself, not in the
Which
school.
we've been doing all along anyways.
Pardon?
We do that anyways.
Yeah.
That's one of our policies that we are,
right,
Yeah.
right. So
that we
I'm
do,
trying
so
to-
that's just,
yeah, so it's taking that, putting it in here, reinforcing.
Putting it in to
the-
say, this is how the board will operate.
Okay,
It's not a box, but it's a clear statement, this is how the board will operate around this issue.
okay. So 4.3 in, 4.4 was, handling of a parent policy violation. So,
So for a board member to become aware under 4.4, it has to be a pattern. There has to be more than one instance. Is that correct? It can be one complaint from somebody outside, but a board member has to have a pattern or more instances than one. Is that what this policy is saying? Because that's what it looks like it says to me. Which I guess, why does a complaint from the public, a
Right.
single complaint, generate more of an action than,
this one here was more aimed at the potential that there has been a policy violation. I think it was aimed at understanding whether the policy itself is written as it is intended, not to take action on the
Right,
apparent violation
Right.
of the policy.
right.
So it's a look at the policy. I think it's more of a reminder just that you gotta recheck and relook at the policies just to make sure they
Well,
continue to.
but under
bear-
section B, Mike, it talks about a written request of an individual to examine a decision of the superintendent that they believe violated a board policy.
Mhm.
So that's not just examining policies, that's examining the superintendent's decisions as well.
Well, it's under
They
the
bel-
conditions that,
You have to go back up.
yeah, the header itself.
So the header,
says-
the board may also use the occasion of a concern to reevaluate the adequacy of its policy to address an issue raised.
Or ask for a monitoring report to see
Yeah.
if,
Right,
because it's either your policy isn't right or the superintendent isn't interpreting it
Right.
correctly.
The interpretation.
Is that, I mean, is
well,
this a binary
I would,
equation, or?
I would not say it's an issue of interpreting correctly. It is the board believes, is it a reasonable interpretation as a board or not? It's not correct or incorrect. It's what any reasonable person from the street would say is reasonable. So it's not ever right or wrong. It's, do we believe this is a reasonable interpretation of the policy? Okay? This, to me, gets deeper into it and provides boards who have more, who have perhaps in the past been more responsive to the public, a way to keep a responsiveness to the public, but draw a line.
Your thoughts on the requirement here based on where we are? I had this one as in or out. I didn't think. 4-3 I needed in.
Yeah,
thought
I'm
4-4,
less.
It's an examination of the policies when issues come up, but I think that's part of the overriding goal of
That's
what we're
right.
trying to do here.
That's
And
right. And my sense is, I've not seen this in many other boards.
Yeah, so I guess on just that thought, I think we need to be introspective in a lot of these issues that we're gonna deal with. Are we looking at the policy rather than the problem, if you will?
Yeah.
I would say I would take this one.
So how do you have clarity for establishing a policy, a potential policy faux pas, whether it's the board, and we're gonna talk later about a staff member who believes that a policy is written too broadly, I believe is one of our little.
It's actually a board member.
Is it a board member?
It's a board member.
Right, it's a board member who believes the policy is written too broadly, but that could be a member of the public just as easily, I would think. And how do we deal with that as a board if we don't specifically speak to it?
You have spoken to it. I think that's the question. So if it's anything about your behavior and your policy, you've spoken to it. This is how we handle complaints. Okay? If somebody believes they have a policy violation, they can come to you and say, we believe you violated your policy. And the question would be, which policy? Is it our board policy or is it an executive limitation? Because what then you would do is, what we're trying to do with rehearsal is they would outline the issue and you'd begin to say, did we, remember what the process was? Have we spoken to it in policy?
Right.
Yes, no.
And if yes.
If yes,
is the interpretation
is the
of
interpretation
policy
reasonable?
What reasonable to the
Yeah.
reason, not to
Yeah.
our content, but to the
Yeah.
reasonable person.
Yeah.
And does it pass then does it pass the muster of
Yeah.
the reasonable interpretation?
Yep. And if it does not, then you begin to say, what's the next step? What's your next step? If you're saying reasonable interpretation, not necessarily there, what do we need to do?
Is the policy too vague? Is the interpretation not right and need to be
Right.
updated? If the interpretation is good to the way the policy is written and the issue still exists, then there might be something in the policy that needs to
That's
be
right.
redefined.
That's
or
correct. You go
reviewed.
deeper. If it's too vague,
So
you go
I think-
deeper.
I think 4-4 is built into the entire process. We've got to keep the mentality there that says this is the way we're going to
Yeah.
operate, not solve the problem.
I would still be happier with it in writing, but
I agree with Jay. I'd like it in.
Thoughts, Tori?
what do you think?
I feel like as
Is it going to
we're
hurt to
making
have
it,
it in?
it's not gonna hurt to have it and to have more clarity around habits.
And that's it, I think it's clarity.
Jen?
I don't,
I think we already do it, so I really don't think that it needs to be in there.
I
It's
agree
already
with that, too.
spoken to.
Okay.
It's
so
already
I-
in there. It's already embedded in there that that is the process that will be done, if not followed.
But I think policies, guys, the more clear you can be with people who are not part of this educational machine, members of the public who are gonna pick this up and read this, they can actually see more of the process, how it works, without having the training that we have or the experience that our admin team does. I think it just establishes clarity.
The other end of the same subject is the tighter the pigeonhole you put yourself into, if you don't. So there's just that balance. I could be had either way on this one, because I don't think it's gonna change the overall
Right.
view. And I would say, based on that, we'll leave it in.
That you're gonna be killing more trees.
If we have something that comes up later and we have to review it, then we'll review it. So
Fair
we'll leave
enough.
4-4 in. Everybody good? I mean, it's not gonna really change the
Yep.
flavor of what we're doing.
I would just add a caution.
Okay.
You're gonna leave
Okay.
it in? I thought we were
I-
gonna take it out.
Well,
And- And the caution is, this actually begins consolidating some of the other policies, the idea of reasonable interpretation. So the superintendents, if you turn to 4.4.2D, if the superintendent's interpretation falls within the reasonable interpretations and there's evidence of compliance with that interpretation, the matter will be dropped at the board level. If the superintendent's interpretation falls outside any reasonable interpretation, or there's a clear violation of reasonable interpretation, the board shall determine the degree of seriousness of the issue and deal with the superintendent regarding performance. That, to me, becomes somewhat counter to the superintendent's evaluation process, and also gets into where you're defining in policy what reasonable interpretation means. I get concerned when I see written two different ways with two different actions. And it changes in my mind that now the superintendent is,
based on the judgment of reasonableness by the board, could be
Well,
on the hook.
I just,
And you know, this is something that could be the smallest little complaint or a very large complaint, and that's opening a door for a lot of just, I don't know, I don't think we need that.
here's the piece that I would just offer, and you can go either way. Keep it in and see how it goes, and review the policy at the end of the year. Or take it out and see what happens without it, and if in fact you are struggling with that policy, then this could be the deeper level. So you can go either way with it. It depends on how much guidance you need. I just get worried when there's possible people saying, well, in this policy, it said, in 4.4.2, it says this, and if I look at reasonable interpretation of the board in 4.3, it's this. Which one are we going by?
I like the latter piece of being able to give us a year to see what comes forth as we begin to continue to questions of interpretations
After.
and what have we said about this. And see the operating, how we operate without
Yeah.
it. And
Jada,
then make a
sway you?
decision.
I'm vacillating. You
Same.
guys make a good argument.
Well, I think based on the
Ange-
contradictory argument,
Yeah, I
I
didn't
Yeah.
pick up on
say
the
we
contradictory
do you have it?
argument.
We don't
take
have
it
it
out.
And
Okay.
why don't, why,
Let's start out, and then we'll reevaluate as we go through the year.
Go ahead, Ange.
I never, she had just asked me why we don't have it, and I
Yeah.
think, or how we operate without it.
We're not keeping
It doesn't
it.
seem to be an issue. I mean, I think what people have said, it's sort of ingrained in the system itself, so that, you know, it really hasn't come into play at all.
Okay. So
We
I
haven't
would
had to get
say
deeper into this.
out and reevaluate.
Okay.
I'm good with that.
Good? Yeah. Amy?
No?
Still out? Okay. So we'll take 4-4 out. 4-5, board linkage to the community.
I will tell you this about this one. This is a huge time requirement of the board, which I am willing to do. But it's gonna be a requirement from all of us. Because this to me has teeth. If you're really gonna do this and follow the spirit of this thing, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've gotta get out there, or I should say, we have to get out there and really engage the public. And that's tough to do, especially in this district.
When you set ends, you need to do that.
Oh, I
This
don't
forces
disagree.
it all the time, and I wasn't convinced that, to get to the ends, we need to do this,
Yep,
and we need to keep looking at the ends on an ongoing basis. So this, I think, is, again, something that would be ingrained in the process itself. But I don't disagree that it's gonna be a lot of work getting to those ends anyway.
and unless there's a you know, again, I'm a person of specifics, I'm sorry, guys, that's who I am. But, you know, unless you're putting something in here that's specific, you have a chance to slough this off. Unless it's a specific policy where you've gotta set things up to have that integration and that communication with the public, you have this opportunity to say, you know, yeah, maybe someday.
I would tell you, even boards who have this struggle with it.
Mhm.
And in my mind, it's a developmental piece. As you move away from monitoring, having to spend so much time monitoring, because it takes a lot of time to learn that process, and moving away from the internal workings of the school, and I'll use the example, you spent probably 30 minutes getting down to Ames Web, getting down to the nuts and bolts of the school, which may be okay, but the work changes to how do we need to be thinking about the future of our school, and how do we, remember the model talks about current boards are management one level up, so you're doing a lot of responding to what the management is requiring you, or you're taking the reports and saying, how about Ames Web, or how about the special ed monitoring report? This is requiring that your board meetings now move from that level of information to, oh my goodness, how are we going to work with the community? When we work with the community, how are we going to set that up? And board meetings then become thinking about the strategies and the topics and how you're going to do that. And that becomes part of your agenda planning.
Can you use that as an good, because you bring up a good point, like one of our biggest, and I think any community member that gets into the education part of it and say, you know, what's going on with our kneecap scores, like how do we put that in there so we're not having to ask those questions? How can we expect to have the data to show that we're increasing, and if we're not, how are we going to make sure that it is being increased? Like, those are the things that
Yep.
would, that I would say, I understand what you're saying, like, the community wants to know. So how are we going to get that
Under
information?
policy governance, how would you respond to that?
That's part of the monitoring
Right.
reports.
But-
based
So
on
if they want the
interpretation of ends.
details of the kneecap report, what would you do?
Well, we can get it from the superintendent.
That's where
It'd
they
be in
go.
the monitoring report.
But not only,
But I understand what you're saying. I understand it's always gonna come through the
Yep.
superintendent, but my concern is what happens when it's not when there's no improvement? Like, if it's just always the same, if
Well-
we're never seeing the data that's improving, how do you change that?
then what you do is, if you talk about your reports, the kneecaps are in progress, but if you talk about how you do it,
Yeah, the kneecaps were just one of the things that we're looking at.
Right, and I understand that.
And,
It's just frustrating.
There are other means. I mean, over this past year, they revised the entire report card system to base on our ends. Our ends have 4 categories, and kids get graded in those 4 categories. So we can see progress in those categories, and that's. I
So it's
think
actually
once you get the
encouraging.
once you get the ends established, they get sort of kind of inducted into all the things that go on in the school. I mean, we have a senior project, and there's a whole manual for the senior project. They revise that to align it with the ends. So there's that kind of stuff just goes on. I think you'll be able to see that kind of progress once
it broadens the view.
Right.
But the board's work is really, you talk about it in terms of the ends, that's the conversation you need to have with the community, which the partnership is really sort of helping with. But it's also sort of beginning to say, where's the future of our school going? What type of, I know some communities are beginning to say, we're gonna bring a Tony Wagner in. You're bringing Paul Tuff in.
Yeah.
And inviting the community, or even going out into one of the community centers and saying the school board is running an evening with Paul Tuff, who talks about what you need to be doing with schools for the future. The school board is running that, and part of that is going to be not only a presentation, but we're going to be asking your opinions. So the board moves from planning for day to day in the school, and you're trying to clear the plate enough for the superintendent to do that work with people and be accountable for that work and responsible for it. And the board's beginning to look down the road and say, you know what, this is what our community, one community that was doing this, brought town planners in. And brought the select board and the town planners and the zoning board together and saying, so what are we looking at down the road? In 10 years, what do we think our community is gonna look like in terms of the number of students we have or the type of businesses we have? So it really changes the focus of the board. It doesn't relieve you of the responsibility to know that the superintendent is doing those things that she's supposed to, with the monitoring reports around executive limitations. But you're really now talking about governing yourself, and rather than hearing 14 reports from the administrators, you're coming in and saying, what's the work we need to do with link with the community? I know one board planned ends meeting, and it took 3 meetings, and that's all they did was plan who's facilitating it, what are the questions we need to ask, how are we going to get invitations out, who do we make sure we get at the meeting, where's it going to be, are we going to have one in each town? I mean, all of a sudden the board focus moved from inspecting here to what's the work we've got to do. And the point that I'd say, Jay, is it really changes that the board has to do the work.
Yeah.
You can't turn and say,
Do you
Mayor,
have this sorry, Val, do you have this
Yes,
policy, Ann?
yes.
You do?
And it's probably the biggest place we fail, is connecting to the community.
It is a struggle, isn't it?
And I think for
And I
us as
think, I think
Winooski,
you guys, I mean, from these meetings, I know you have a bunch of things going on with the community. And I think you have a great place to start from.
we do, but it's still something we struggle greatly with,
Yeah.
you know, in
All
terms of
boards.
access. And I think that having it, for as I look at it, is what I like about it is it keeps it on the forefront. You know, it actually gives some structures, you know, and as we continue, one, it shows, wow, we really are doing a lot of this, which is fabulous. But we still have a ways to go. And I like the structure and it just being clear about it.
Yeah.
I like the fact that, I mean, even if it is a failure, it's a room for growth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's growth in the right direction,
And
so.
it's exciting to think, what you were just describing, that's where we're headed. That's a really exciting place to be thinking about.
yeah, because you're now thinking, trying to produce a future and keep people thinking about that.
I like this policy because it challenges the board.
Well, I just would like to point out, I think like Leon touched on it in his administrative report, that, you know, they'll be giving us some feedback from the Partnership for Change and helping us develop our ends policy. That right now, the Partnership for Change and the Nellie Mae grant, that we have a lot of opportunities to get out in the public because the grant is making that possible for us. And I don't want to say, yes, this is great, let's put this, you know, policy in place, because right now, it's only too easy to kind of fall into this, because the grant is making this very easy and accessible, because they're kind of putting these opportunities in front of us to gather this information.
To foster.
And when that part kind of moves on, and we're going to have to move forward with this ourselves, that it kind of falls off.
Well, hopefully you already have those community ties and the
Right.
Building relationships.
The
we're already
relationships
building
to
it.
continue them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Jay, thoughts, board linkage in?
Yeah, I would just soon have it in, I
Yep.
think.
Tori? I look in. Jen?
Yeah.
In?
But
Amy?
but I do agree with Amy, once we lose some of these partnership for change opportunities, we're gonna have to do this ourselves.
But you gotta establish through the meetings we're
Oh, I
having now, the
agree.
foundation to get that and continue it. But that
Yep.
keeps the focus where it needs to be. All right, Amy, in? Good?
Reluctantly.
4, 5, in, 4,
Well,
7.
Just to go back to that, I think, I think it's in yours, I don't have the updated copy yet. But at number 2, it says, the board will establish and maintain a 3-year ownership linkage
I like that.
plan.
Mhm.
I like that.
So I don't know how long this community stuff is lasts.
3
but-
years.
3 years? Well, next year you'll have to add to it.
And then we can establish a committee
Yeah.
too. I mean, it's
Right.
not like
Yep.
Right.
everyone's gonna
Yep.
have to get together
But,
once a
but,
month.
and
or
also the other
3
thing
times
is
a
that the Partnership for Change is focusing really on sort of high school and certainly sort of whole community, but there's a whole underground going for early ed and going out and building relationships too and doing the JFK part of it that isn't being sponsored by Partnership for Change, and that's already on the works too, so I think that we have a lot to build on, and having this clarity just helps us grow.
We gotta keep moving here. We
Yeah.
gotta.
Yeah.
Just the other piece is, remember, the board has to monitor these policies.
Yeah.
So if you're seeing that you're not doing it, then you have to self-report, we're not
Not
doing it.
once.
We now need
Yeah.
to make sure our agenda for next year includes this.
Okay. 4.7 was also for consideration, it's request for presentation to the board. This really focuses the requests to the board on, down to requests to present perspective regarding board policy development or allegations that existing board policy is inadequate. Quick question, Ange, you guys have this one in?
No.
Okay.
Is it addressed somewhere else?
This one is not, and when I saw this in the model policies, it took me by surprise.
Yeah, that's,
And I think what it is to help boards that struggle with everybody that wants to come in and present to them. So they can say we're following board policy, because unless it addresses, people want to come in and talk about the early ed program, or I want to come in and talk about nutrition, or I want to come in and talk about, pardon?
The F-35s.
The all those things. If you establish that this is the work that you do, and if you have a concern, where was it that was interesting that they were having a conversation about towers going in and board members deciding whether that was within their purview or not? This, I've never seen. I probably would recommend not having it. If there's an issue where people don't believe you're following your policy, they present it to you. But all the rest is means.
mm-hmm.
And if you're doing really good community linkage, you're going out and finding out about these things anyway.
How does this tie into like the public comments that are at the beginning of our meetings? I mean, is this a specific presentation and you're not going to allow members of the public that show up to a board meeting
No,
and have comments, or is this different?
It's different.
It is different.
and if you look here, what this is trying to say is that the board will consider requests from members of the public to make presentations, but only under 2 categories. Public comment to the board, people can come in and make any comment that they want. The question is, you're under no obligation to deal with it. It's a public comment time. This is your board work time. This is saying that if somebody wants to come, it has to fall under the point that it's got to help you develop your policy, or it's saying you're in violation of your policy.
So,
I actually like it. Just because, you know, if you take the F-35s for an example, or the early childhood, like, so if you get a providers group and a bunch of them are concerned about what's that going to do to them, you know, they may want to come to the board and ask questions and have some time to give their feedback and input and going forward. And I'm just using it as an example.
right, right.
Yeah.
For why this would be good, because then you're limiting their time, you're limiting what they can present, and you can either say no or yes, depending on what the relevance of the presentation.
What would
But
be
they-
your first question?
How does this pertain to policy?
Have we spoken to
The
this?
ends,
Yeah, have we spoken to this in policy?
right.
Would you even want to consider that? Is that something the board should be involved with?
But it gives the public the opportunity, the group's
Well,
opportunity to do that.
there's still a public comment period.
They can come and
But-
talk to you for
and
5 minutes
we
at the
give,
beginning of the
you
board
know,
meeting.
3-minute time limit, 5-minute time limit for anything, which is okay. But again, as Val mentioned, you don't have to act on it. And then,
This could say, somebody could come in and decide that they were going to give a presentation.
Only if they request it.
if they request
But
it.
it has to pertain
To policy.
Policy development
Or
or
allegations that
that,
the board of policy isn't having.
Right.
I would go with a,
I guess
Valves.
I guess the only concern I would have not putting something like this in is we're 5 people of the general public. And what if we're not getting it right and somebody that
Yep.
has a little bit more experience and says, you know, this might actually work better for you and you really aren't doing it right? Because take for instance our the turnover with, you know, letting the voters vote for that fund, you know? We didn't know that, you know, that was supposed to be done.
Yep.
So this allows that also to happen, whereas you might be cooed off if it's just a general public
Yeah,
comment.
but I think the piece is you have the ability to set your agenda, and if that comes out, the board can make a determination to put that on their agenda. So,
review the policy, review the interpretation.
if you look at 4.6, agenda planning,
Okay. Okay, so it's in there. So it's embedded in the other ones, basically.
And the process itself, that if you've got something you have a question on
Yep.
policy, you can move the agenda around to deal with either the policy itself or the interpretation or both. So I think it's covered.
Okay, then I'm good with not putting it in.
I would like it out, at least to start. I don't, Jay,
Yeah, out.
Corey,
out,
Amy?
out.
Okay, out is 4.7. 4.10 is board committee principles. What are the thoughts on 4.10? This one is, this one is a little too close to the heart. It says board committees, when used, will be assigned so as to reinforce the wholeness of the board's job and so as never to interfere with delegation from board to superintendent. But committees
Is this
to help,
talking
but
about
this really
policy
doesn't.
committees or?
It's like superintendent committees
Do you-
and
Right, these are board members being members of
PAC committees.
the committee, but not
those would,
representing.
go ahead.
These are committees that the board would set up for, well, maybe your ends, maybe you set up a committee to help create your ends. I think what it's saying is that, you're setting up committees to help do your job. You're not setting up a committee on math curriculum,
Right.
Right.
that kind of thing.
So like a superintendent search committee,
That's to be correct,
Yes.
right.
But this talks about assisting us with policy.
right.
And so would be a committee on policy or?
I mean,
Well, it's
It
a,
seems very,
Well-
this just seems very vague. to me.
I
Well,
think
it
this is
hits-
for more of a bigger,
Section 5 really says committees would be used sparingly and ordinarily in an ad hoc
Yep.
capacity to do whatever you need to do at the
Yep.
time, figure it out, fix it, or modify it
Right.
and move on.
This is generally for larger
Necessarily be.
boards.
right.
I mean, if you've
Right.
got a board like Ange's size that may need, but it would also disallow a facilities committee. Now, if the superintendent wanted to get a facilities committee,
That's her business.
she could do it.
Right.
But the board couldn't decide, okay, I'm gonna put a facilities together.
And if somebody
committee
on the
together.
board is on that committee, it's as a citizen, not as a board member. I
Right.
think that's what I had taken out of most all
Right,
of this.
so like, for example, the, I'm sorry, Amy, go ahead.
Does this govern when, like, we appoint someone as a board representative to a committee? Like, we have a Nellie Mae rep, we have a board member on the
Like,
superintendent
and
search
PACs,
committee.
but a PACs
We,
committee, like the
when
parent.
one of us acts in a capacity for all of us as representatives, or is this
We'll
strictly?
take the teacher negotiation.
Yeah, like,
Negotiations is probably a better example.
Yeah,
Okay.
because that's
Um,
just the board.
Because the board is taking that, there are, in some situations, boards will say that's a management decision. In Vermont, most boards keep that responsibility, so you would appoint that committee. When it's a less clear piece when Nellie Mae and everybody else wants a board representative. If you look at your policies, if you're going as a representative of the board, are you the board? What's the only way a board can act?
with all of us in a quorum.
with all of you in a quorum, and when you come back with that information, how does it need to be dealt with
In a public meeting.
within your policy? Many of the meetings that you're in are more means than policy.
So how does it work? How do you deal with it, Ange?
I'm trying to think of committees that people get assigned to. I think they're like teacher certification, don't they require?
Oh, standards board, yep.
Standards board required it.
Local standards board,
Requires a board member?
yeah. It depends on the area.
Well, maybe it's just ours.
Yeah.
I can't think of many other, I think the senior project committee, I think, has a board member.
And so what latitudes
But
do you allow those board members who are on those committees as a
See,
policy governance board?
I can't think of I don't think they're necessarily taking positions for the board. I mean, they're a representative who is a board member. They're a member of that committee who is a board member and has that background. But I don't think they're necessarily making statements for the board. I can't think of any, maybe with Nellie Mae, it's a little different, I don't know.
It would be great to have that clarification, because I think, a lot of us sit on certain committees, and there's been some confusion about whether we sit on that committee as a parent and a community member,
Right.
or as a board member, and
Yep.
and what is the difference
Well,
between?
under our
in
current
the two.
policy, if the board specifically assigns a board member to that committee, then that person has the full authority of a board member. If a board member goes on a committee of their own volition, then they're a citizen or a parent or whatever. That's how it's working right now. Like on the tax committee, which you and I sometimes both go to, you have been assigned by the board. I haven't. I'm there as a parent.
I mean,
Nellie Mae, Amy has been assigned to officially by the board. Jen and I have been officially assigned to negotiations.
But I think the key in that is even if you're representing the board, you're not making decisions for the board. You're just basically bringing the information back to the board. You're not there to say, oh, well, the board feels, because nobody really knows that until you see the board.
Well, and that's why
There's no.
yeah, and
I
that's
don't
why
see
in
it that we would even need
negotiations,
this policy.
even two board members can really only make a tentative agreement because there is not a quorum
Right.
there to make that
Right.
decision, so
So I would say this one is not
I don't think
We
this
don't
is
need it.
really
necessary.
necessary. So out with 410, and we're really pushing the end of time here. So we gotta get to, there's 4 more that are conditional. 411 was it's the ownership linkage.
Right? Committee,
Yeah.
I don't think we need that.
I had this one as out,
Yeah, out.
I'm fine with it,
and then 413 was,
What about,
consultation. Board values a culture that holds consultation at its core. Consultation occurs to gain different perspectives and believes that meaningful consultation is planned, purposeful, and equitable, and that it contributes to enhanced decision-making. Consultation occurs because the views and experiences of our owners and stakeholders are valued and informed. I mean, that is the whole reason we're here to do
We're
this.
having if we're following the board linkage policy, this really doesn't, we should already know what their thoughts are on
Right.
policies.
Right, and that's something we gotta monitor
So I
heavily.
would say out on
That
413.
would be the same, for the same reasons. 14, rules of order, I don't,
I think we already talked about that, and I think that's out.
yeah, I think we've followed that pretty much anyway, and it's ingrained, actually, it's required, right? The Robert's rules,
Right, so 414 is out.
redundant, and then the student representation on the board was one that I had. We've never done it. I don't know if many do. Do you guys have a student? Yeah, Mount Abe did. How did that work out? I mean, this here's a 2-year assignment, junior and senior year.
Yeah, junior, senior. When, they didn't always have one. When there was a student that was really interested, then he'd be assigned to the board. And it worked really well. It was a kind of a nice way for the student to
understand a little bit of politics.
About leadership and governance.
I would love to get to the point as a board where we have a close enough relationship with our students and staff where this would become part of our modus operandi. I don't know if that is right this minute, but I would like to get to that point where we could get because we've had students come, but they don't, so it always seems to not.
So here's the question I would ask. When you look at what board work is, under policy governance, what's the role of the student in assisting you in that work?
Biggest part, ends. Who better to tell us where they want to go?
They can help you, but you can go out and get them, but to come to a meeting every month, what is their work in policy governance? What do they add to your conversation?
It's interpretation of the policy.
Okay.
The policy itself, as the wording and then
Yep.
the linkage back into the community.
And you're doing monitoring reports, you're doing all of those things. Many boards have students on to get a student's perspective of what's going on in the school.
Yep.
Is that what you're gonna be doing?
No,
No,
it's
that's
almost
not
like
what
another
you-
set of eyes
yeah.
of, what have we already said about this in policy?
Yep.
And,
Yep.
and having them be able
Yep.
to see it.
So what I would say is if you're going to move to have a student be involved, then I'd put this policy in and I would require them to get the board training on policy governance and make that part of the requirement here. Otherwise, I'd keep it sort of in abeyance, and if you're moving in that direction, then put it in. But this is saying you'd be out of compliance.
If you didn't have.
If we
If you-
didn't have it.
Yeah.
If we didn't have it.
Is the policy of the district that the interested students be represented on the board? And you don't have that right now. So if you want to do it, then you're going to start that
To-
process.
Out, but to be revisited.
Yeah, and
I like the idea of having somebody.
Honestly, I think
just
revisited
don't think we
sooner
have a-
rather than later. I think
Yeah.
it's a goal to have this policy in, if that makes any sense.
Well, we
I-
already try to get the student council here every month.
Right, this is,
And for a while, they were doing
I know
really
they're
well.
doing
and they would
great,
come
yeah,
and they
last
would
year.
tell-
so I guess I would recommend with this one, and rather than being in violation right out of the chute, is to leave it out until we get a process to actually find a way to put it in.
Yeah.
I like the idea of
And
having,
training and stuff.
and then get the training. Okay, any other thoughts on any of the rest of policy 4? So Mary, I don't know if you caught, I had 4.3 was in, 4.4 was out, 4.5 was in, 4.7 was out, 4.10 was out, 4.11 is out, 4.13 is out, 4.14 is out, and 4.15 is out at this point.
This day, 12
And
is still
then
in.
there's a couple that we're gonna revisit.
12 is
but
governance
we'll-
investment.
414 should be in.
It just,
Okay, and
It's-
I
I
think
think
the,
mentioned 12. Is that
the issue there was that we
It's
are
in.
required to go with
They only
Robert's
took the one,
rules, and
that's
part
governance
of-
oh, they only
investment.
took the one there were
Do it
questions.
anyway.
There were questions about.
So anything else in 4?
411,
Ready to
you say
move this one forward through to a motion?
Because it's
to
already
accept?
covered with board
So
linkage.
I would accept the motion at this point to accept board management delegation, the 3s, and governance processes, the 4s, with the 4s as noted in the, for consideration only that we just went through.
So moved.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. With that, we'll move to 8C and talk to the consolidation study proposed plan from the VSBA. We got 2 letters from Steve Dale. The discussion is then around working with that. I think one of the 2 things we gotta do is determine
Thank you, guys.
who, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Determine who we may want to work. So far, Mary, thank you for your help here. We've gotten the Burlington School Board voted, I believe, last night to engage in the study with us. South Burlington is also taking up the issue of engaging with us in this study also. And so I think between the two, that will you know, certainly broaden the prospects of the outcome of the study itself. Any thoughts on the first, well, not the application first, but the second one, the proposal piece
For the VSBA, from the VSBA?
from the VSBA, yeah,
Yeah.
proposal for the school district,
great.
and I mean, any thoughts as you went down through it on,
Who wrote this proposal?
this came from the Vermont School
Steve
Board
Dale.
Association with Steve Dale, and then here there are a couple of names it's partnering with other districts and
Yeah, I think it's a great.
working down through.
Looked awesome.
The net of this is having this Burlington School Board agree to work with us, and Jay, I don't remember exactly which act these are, 163. There's a grant for.
153 and 156
So
respectively.
there's a $5,000 grant when somebody else is to go in and look at this, so that in the VSBA's perspective will pay for most of what they would do under this section. In again, 2 phases. So the possible consultants down in on page 2, I think one of the guys mentioned in here has done some work for us already, and I think Jay, you were around at that point in time.
Yeah,
That
I
was
highly
Ray Prue.
recommend Ray Prue.
Okay, apparently, as Steve would tell me, he's got time.
Okay.
So
Can I just let you know in a memo that we received last week from the VPA that he is recovering from a heart attack that must have just recently had.
Ah.
I think I heard that too.
okay.
Ray Prue.
So John Everett is also interested and is doing some work with VSBA and has done some work with policy governance training.
And I really like John. I guess my only concern would be, he was a very recent superintendent at South Burlington, which is a district that we may possibly be doing a study with. And I just would like to avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest with him. So, and I,
O'Brien would be good because his district just went through the whole process.
okay,
He's on here.
Who is that, Mary?
He's the
Tom
superintendent
O'Brien,
of
who's the
Virgins.
superintendent in Virgins, they just went through, a red.
yeah. Now, this is not, I guess I'd like some clarification as well, because this is not to study a red.
Right.
No,
Right.
but he's a supervisory union, that's why he did a red.
Right, but to be
Similar- it's a
clear,
similar
we
process,
are
right.
studying potentials to do interdistrict contracts under section 2 of Act 156 and possible adjustment of supervisory union boundaries. In other words, forming an SU, like Vaughn told us here, when he visited, forming a supervisory union with 2 member school districts, not a unified union or a regional educational district. That's my understanding of this study. Does everyone else understand this the same way?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
And the $5,000 really is geared towards that initial study. You know, should this go further, and I would suggest that we just basically approve phase 1 at this point, because phase 2, we don't even know if it's gonna happen. And if that happens, then you start talking about regional educational districts, unified unions, the whole mechanics of what is gonna happen, and that's why there's more money involved.
Don't they require us to do that though?
No,
They're not
not,
requiring us to do phase 2.
not that I, not my understanding from
we don't-
Vaughn.
Yeah, I think what you have to do is, in the first paragraph, it says, you have to submit to the state board or to Armando, what's your proposal?
Right.
So you would have to include phase 1, what you're going to do.
Right,
And then in phase 2, it does say that it involves deep analysis
Mhm.
of the information gathered in phase one.
Mhm.
So there is a phase two.
you
That's
have the whole
analysis
purpose.
part.
But you have no idea what it might be until
Right.
phase one is complete. So I
Correct,
think
and-
phase two would be dependent on the outcome of phase one.
Right,
is-
and
okay.
it even says, you know, actually, to go back up to Vaughn's, because he was the state rep, I believe he says, he talks about, assuming that phase one produces tangible options for action, phase two would be initiated with a request for analysis and implementation grant. So that's coming right from Vaughn, from the state. And, you know, so phase one, we're investigating whether this is even feasible, and I would assume this would be much like, you know, whether it's John or O'Brien or whoever does this, or Ray, it would be much like the last time where there would be a tremendous amount of information that would be gathered from the central office. Sandy, you remember you had to provide, and Rebecca, I believe you were here then, right? You had to provide a tremendous amount of information, financial information, and then this individual will basically go to the other school districts and knock on their door, as it were, and gather the same type of information, and see what is actually involved here. Is this reasonable, and if so, what type of, as I wrote in my district news last month, either consolidation or collaboration.
Right.
And I think the commissioner
this-
made it clear that both of them are on the table.
Right. So this
So-
is both educational and a financial.
Correct.
So, okay, so I will, Ray Prue would be our
First choice.
primary
Mhm.
choice.
If
If
he's
health,
doing well,
if
we
health
wish him well.
issues prevent him, yeah, obviously wish him well. But if not, I think I heard Tom O'Brien would be our second.
And I
option.
don't know him, so.
Okay, came recommended from the VSBA.
Yep.
So,
And so this would be for the application for the $5,000 grant and the implementation of
Phase
phase
one.
one.
Yep.
And that's as far basically as this goes, until we decide the results from phase one, whether this is even worthwhile, or the
Yep.
state decides it's worthwhile.
So before we enter into a contract with the state to do this, so VSBA to do this, we send the proposal back in, make sure it's agreed that we agree on what it is we are and are not gonna do.
Mhm.
So under
And then-
Act 156, we're agreeing to, what is it, there's 4 provisions?
Well, Act 156, folks, is like 33 pages
Yeah,
long.
it's got a lot of
And,
pieces
and
to
it does not replace Act 153. Act 153, which was passed back in 2010, it has some things that they have deleted out of it in Act 56 and added some clarifications. And we're basically in Section 2, Section 4, and Section 5 is my understanding. That's what covers the $5,000 grant. As you start to go further down into the law, it starts talking about regional educational districts and how that all works, which is the larger grant process.
Okay,
And it does say, select a subcommittee to oversee the effort by March 1st.
Let's just do that now.
yeah, and so then we need a subcommittee of 1 or a subcommittee of 2? I think a subcommittee of 2 from the board might be or recommended. We obviously can't go with 3. Amy, did you have something?
I'm just, I see that Burlington has already agreed to this.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a little concerning to me that they've already agreed to it before we've even discussed it.
No,
Because
they're
we-
independent activities. I mean, they've agreed that if we go forward with the study, they would partner with us in completing that study.
But so hasn't South Burlington, am
They
I
haven't
correct?
voted on it yet, but they're gonna look at it, yeah.
It's-
And
yeah,
both can do it.
VSBA did reach out to them.
And I'm correct in that they're putting it on their agenda to agree to the same,
South Burlington.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, it'd
So-
be part of the study.
why are we not considering partnering with South Burlington versus partnering with Burlington?
I think the issue is partnering with them both,
With
not
both-
one or the other.
both of them.
Just looking
Both
at
of them would be
options
And
to partner.
I
What if
would,
that
I
comes
would
up?
have this recommendation that before this thing really lifts off the ground, whenever we choose somebody or whenever we have our candidate, that they come back and we set aside some quality time in a board meeting that's not rushed, where we can go through exactly what we're looking to do and how we're in, set some parameters as far as what this person is gonna be looking at and who they're gonna be looking at it with. Because I don't feel that Winooski should limit its options to strictly one school district. We are surrounded by, quite a few other districts, and if we have to do this, I think we should knock on everybody's door to give everyone a fair shake.
Mhm.
And the other thing I would suggest with this, and no offense to you, Mary, but I don't think that the point people should be the superintendents. Just for the simple fact of, when you're talking about a consolidation of school districts, one of the primary things that happens is the elimination of one of the superintendents. If you form an SU, you've got one superintendent that's probably gonna deal with both
But wait a minute.
districts.
I
And
thought that's what we weren't doing.
Well,
We're
with
doing
an
a
S,
study to see.
We're not the point people, Jay.
Well,
My
that's-
understanding was we're just signing off.
this says
on
the point people
agreement.
for this project will be the two superintendents. That's what it says here in Vaughn's thing, so.
Oh, in Bond's
In
thing. I was
Vaughn's.
looking at what Steve had sent.
Okay, so I guess I would recommend that we have, obviously, we are the sponsors of this thing. We would have two of us be I don't know if the sponsors is right, but the communication link between the VSBA.
About whether one's being
Person.
required to do it by the state.
Right,
Right,
So this would be a board committee.
this would be a board committee.
I
I would
would-
recommend a committee of two.
yeah.
And I guess I would,
Who wants to do it?
yeah,
I
any
recommend Jay.
volunteers,
Because he seems to have all the legal stuff.
right?
I have been through this once before.
And I would say Tori if a second, unless Jen, you got
Heck, no.
Amy?
I'm good.
All right.
Tori.
And Tori, do you have time to?
Time? What's
to-
time?
I really don't have
Any
time
except-
either.
No,
Those
yes,
minutes
I-
after
I-
midnight when
I
there's
could do
nothing
it.
else to do.
Right. Yes,
Okay,
I've
so-
been wondering what to do with myself. Yes,
So-
I'd love to.
Okay, so,
Is there
Based-
something, I'm just, before we, tie this up with a bow, is there something that says that this has to be done by March first? And is South Burlington not going to have their meeting before March
we
first?
have enough, I believe, Mary, correct me if I'm wrong, but with Burlington's concurrence to aid us in the study, South Burlington would be good to have.
But not necessary.
Not required to have the secondary piece that you need to get the grant
Well,
money to
they're
come.
gonna have their meeting, I think, either this week or early next week. And,
Right.
David said it will be on their agenda.
Right, it would be great to have
But,
it.
the commissioner was asking for the proposal by February 15th, and I asked for an extension.
Right.
So, I think
I
that's how the
just-
March
Right.
date came in
Yeah, I have
here.
no,
He's
I have
asking-
no problem approving this with it being made clear here in an open meeting that we're reaching out to as many of our neighboring districts as possible. I don't think we should limit our options
Nope.
unless the
It needs
board
to be
disagrees.
changed in here that we, well, I guess, it says we voted on January, whatever, to proceed with it, with our own study, and that they voted to support this study. Shouldn't it say something in there that we agreed to work with them or something?
And that'll be part of the proposal, or part of the details when they get into it.
Yeah, those dates, where you're saying where the X's are.
Yeah, this
I
is
think
just a
it's because
draft,
Steve was
isn't it?
just sending the draft.
Right, this is just a
But,
Right.
Yeah,
draft,
that
right.
will be fixed.
Yep, and so we'll ask him to redo the
Yeah.
proposal that he's gonna send to the state, send it out to us, and I'll contact you guys just for any any thoughts. If there's any serious problems with it across anybody, we'll either decide to get together or send it forward.
And we're requesting at the current time phase $1 only,
Yes.
and I believe it's quarterly. That
Phase,
the costs go quarterly to the state, and they'll reimburse, I believe is what the law says. You can
I'll get a
check.
grant award, and it'll probably be the same as the other grants, and I'll follow the same statute.
Right.
okay, good. So I'd accept a motion to have Jay and Tori be the board reps for this endeavor.
I motion that Jay and Tori be the board reps for this endeavor.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so we look forward to miraculous things with regard to both financial and educational opportunities.
Woo, there you go.
Okay, good, thank you.
The cheerleader.
So 9A here, the federal tax ID number update Mary had brought to the attention from Jim, is still here, I can't see you back there, Jim. Had noted that there was some usage of the tax ID number, and Mary, do you wanna go back through?
Well, I'll invite Jim, if you wanna come over, Jim, and, just share your findings. So, while Jim's getting seated, he had a conversation when we were having our district audit done this year, just with the auditor who is a CPA, just around some IRS rulings. And so, one of the things that Jim discovered was that our outside groups, our PTO, boosters, that they were using our federal ID number. And so Jim did some legal research and is making the recommendation that they no longer use the federal ID number, because if they are, then we really should be managing their funds and they should be going through a PO process and be part of the audit. So I'll let you take it from there to add details.
Okay, for you that do not understand it, the Internal Revenue Service issues a federal ID number, basically known as the tax ID number, to all businesses who pay wages or any other compensation to whoever. And that's a distinct number, it goes with the business. They issued an ID number to the Winooski School District some time ago. We can't ever find when it was, but it was a long time ago. And for the exclusive use of the Winooski School District. When I came on board as the treasurer last July, I did a little research and found that basically there are actually more than 3, but there were 3 outside groups using our federal ID number for their banking transactions and purposes. That's the Winooski PTO, the boosters, and the WEA. Okay? All, of course, have no real affiliation with the school district except as an outside group. The Internal Revenue Service says that as the responsible party, and they classify they who hold the number as a responsible party, they do have the liberty of allowing the use of their number by other entities, as long as you manage, direct, and control the activities and the finances of those organizations. What does it mean to us? I talked to Mary about it. We contacted Joe Gamache. He gave us a legal opinion, says, although it's not really a good thing to do, if you wanted to control and do all of their work for them, you could in fact let them use your number. I recommend against it. Why? First of all, the WBA can get their own. They can be affiliated with the Vermont NEA if they wanted to. They can use their number. The boosters and the PTO can get their own. It's very, you can get your federal ID number in 5 minutes online. Okay? Getting your status as a nonprofit takes a little bit longer and sometimes a little burdensome. But you can do that, okay? Depending on who you want to be. My big contention is that as long as, even if you manage, control, and operate those outside organizations using your number, you're at risk because you assume their liability. If they pay somebody a wage and don't report it, the school district gets dinged. If they do something that violates the provisions of their federal ID number or Internal Revenue Service regulations, the school district gets dinged. In other words, we are mother and father to those organizations. And as long as you handhold them and do everything for them, you might wanna do that. I don't think we wanna be in that business, because I've checked around and there ain't many school districts who do that, if any, okay? They all are saying, hey, let them take care of their own. It's not a big deal. Let them get their own number, let them go on their own. So my recommendation is that we tell them, gee, you've had it for all these years, you've enjoyed it, et cetera, but in fact, you really need to go on your own. Get your own ID number, get your own nonprofit status, whatever you wanna do, and enjoy your life, okay? We don't want to have to handhold you. The risk factor is really too big, okay? And I know a lot of people don't sue school districts, but there could be a class action and it could be us, see? So the liability factor is the huge thing, okay? And in essence, here's just a very quick classic case. All those organizations I mentioned using our federal ID number have bank accounts and use that for an identification purpose. They also receive interest, maybe very little, but receive interest on those bank accounts under our ID number. The Internal Revenue is good, they haven't said anything yet, but they could come back and say to us, you never reported that interest. We don't report taxes because we're a public entity, but by law, you're supposed to report that. We never have, and nor has anybody else under our circumstance. Let's not push the envelope at this point. Now, I can't do anything about it except bring it to your attention along with Mary.
Yeah.
You as the board are the responsible agents for the school district. You have to decide what you want to do. You can let them continue. You can tell them, sorry, go your own way and get your own ID number, whatever you want to do. But you're the one that has to do that. That's your responsibility, your fiduciary responsibility as the school board.
You mentioned one other thing, Jim, about if they were ever audited, would the district have to pay the taxes on the money that
Sure.
they may not, okay?
Yeah, because I
So it
said,
would be the district's responsibility.
by virtue of the fact that it is our number, our school district federal ID number, we are, and it's classified by the internal, we are the responsible party. We're responsible for anybody who uses those. So if anything were to, if they got audited, there was a tax, there was a penalty and everything, the bill would come here.
So, after Jim and I had our conversation and Rebecca, I did talk with Tammy, the PTO president, and explained it to her. I checked in with her yesterday and she said this is on their agenda at their next meeting. They haven't been able to have a meeting since she and I talked a few weeks ago, and they're gonna decide, do they wanna move forward with getting their own number and their tax exempt status, or do they want us to manage, control, and
Well,
and
then
go
we have to
that
decide if we want them
That's
to
your
or not.
decision.
Right.
So if we decide that they have to get their own, then they have to just go
And,
get their own.
and right, and because they didn't have any decision from the board, that's why it was a discussion item that they were gonna have at their next meeting. But if the board decides that that's what they need to do, then they, obviously, they will go and do that. They do have the paperwork, I gave that to them.
Just one last thing, I think, they need to be told officially in writing what your decision is and how they're supposed to proceed.
And wouldn't this be for any organization? So we wouldn't wanna just close it off to the PTO, the WEA, right?
No.
Well,
Would
James said that the WEA did get your own, yeah. So they're no longer using ours.
One recommendation, not that I don't trust the WEA, but I would get that officially in writing. Because when the Internal Revenue comes knocking on your door, they're gonna say, where is it, show me where it says that. So get it in writing that they've got their own number and what it is.
Yeah, the other thing that needs to happen with this is, should the groups become basically a 501c3 that would donate to the school district, I would assume is how this would be set up. And again, I'm not totally on board with how all this works, but I guess the other question that would have to be hashed out is, what is their relationship to the school district? And that probably would be something you'd want to get in writing of, okay, now you have this outside organization, what are their roles, functions, how do they fit into the school? Because they're no longer a school-sponsored party anymore.
Yeah, but once they get their 501 status, they're gonna have to file a Form 990 every year. Or one of those forms, and 990 is the most common. But they're gonna have to show where they made donations, where their money came from. They're gonna have to, because the Internal Revenue is gonna be knocking on their door saying.
But they should be doing that anyways.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm saying the school district needs to also have something clear, and under policy governance, it'll probably be through your office, Mary, but what their relationship is with the school. You know, do they just fall under a regular board policy, or a regular policy as far as nonprofit organizations, the bulk of which are Winooski residents, I mean, or, you know, how does their relationship change if they are not officially under the auspices of the school district? And I think that needs to be delineated beyond the money side of things. I think in a way that's sort of an easier thing to do. Organizations that do under $25,000 a year can actually do an e-postcard every year for their filings. So it's not as difficult as it sounds, I'm finding out.
Well, there are various limitations, just about where do they fall into those.
Right.
Is the higher their revenue stream coming in, the more difficult, more complex their.
Right. And how does the school district, on the other side of things, how does the school district view them?
I think, Jay, to answer your question is you don't. They're a completely separate organization. They're like the Ford Foundation, they're like the MacArthur Foundation, they're like any charitable organization. If you're not running their books, they're running their books, and they do what they want. Now, if they want to have a meeting, they have to come and approach you and say, you know, we want to have your facility for a meeting, we want to have a raffle, whatever, and you have that control where they interface with the district. But if they want to go have a bake sale in front of the gas station, no. If they want to give a scholarship, if they want to hand out awards, that's them. I came because I got kind of involved with this. There's several things we can do real quick. First thing is, Jim's right, it's absolutely easy to go through the process of getting these EINs for them. No problem. Somebody says go. 5-minute process on each. The chicken and egg problem is, to get an EIN number, you have to give an EIN number or a social security number. Now, maybe we give the schools to start, maybe we get some individual to volunteer their social security number. That's got to get figured out. And then the 501c3 makes them a completely charitable organization, which means for most people, you can contribute up to, I think it's 50% of your income to this particular organization. So if somebody wants to give $25,000, that could be done. There are a number of PTOs and friends of organizations in the state of Vermont, several in Chittenden County, that have 501c3 status already. They tend to be a little bit bigger, but, well, actually Edmonds School has one by itself. I think they're smaller collectively than Winooski, but it can be done. Well, we'll just use the PTO. If they wanted to do that, that's great. Their filing fees and clearance fees for the IRS, there are some hoops to jump through, but that would be their choice to make if they wanted to pay the money to do that. Otherwise, they either have to go under the exempt organization status, and I'm not sure that they can make that, but that's up to them to figure out. I think the first question is, would the board go along with using the school's EIN to kick off the new EINs for these organizations? And if not, then members of that organization are going to have to step forward, volunteer their social security number, we go from there.
What are the implications of the school's EIN number being used for a sub-organization? Is there any ties?
I can't answer that.
Do you know, Jim?
The school, if you use the school's EIN, you remain the responsible party until such time as they get their own.
But aren't we somewhat responsible for these organizations anyways, because they are part of the school?
Well, they're not.
They're not really part of
Really?
the school by
Yeah.
virtue of their
PTO.
status.
Mm.
They're an outside recreational, charitable, whatever you want to call them,
Okay.
organization, okay? In
Set
other
up
words,
to
you can
do
live
the
without them. The people, you know, the citizen taxpayers of Winooski have no control over them.
But if we let them use our IEN or what you were saying,
Yeah.
to get started with their own federal ID number.
Which they can get within 5 minutes.
Right.
So then.
That still doesn't, we're not still, the
You're
parent
responsible-
group,
you're
once
res-
they get their own number.
Once they get their own number, you're free and clear.
Right, but what I was wondering is what's the implication of us letting them use our number to get their own number so that one of the parents doesn't have to, put over there, especially since, parent groups do change
You
over.
could, but put a time constraint on it.
Oh, sure, I mean, I think that, to keep the liability off of us, but at least just being able to support the groups, which do a lot to support our students.
Right.
Seems to
Yeah.
be a,
So what happens if these are outside groups? Say the PTO is gonna hold a dance. They're now an outside organization. They're gonna have children at the dance. This is why I'm saying that this is more complicated than it looks on the
why,
surface.
I don't understand that.
Well, to
That's
have an
why I just
outside
asked that.
organization and have, it would be all people we know on PTO, but to have that and have them have access to children in the school district, and we're allowing it, there's a certain amount of liability that has to happen.
That's happening today, though.
Right. but
That's
that's-
already happening, and we've
Yeah.
already addressed
We
that
have,
in,
we're just addressing the finances piece of it.
Right.
we've already addressed that last
But
year.
I'm saying there
Yeah.
are more things than the finances once they separate from the school district.
I think it's a financial separation, it's not any more separate than that we
What about,
already exist
what
now.
about insurance coverage for any of those groups?
They are, when they use our facilities, they're going through our facility policies.
So they would
They
have
would
to
do this.
carry insurance, because people that use our facilities that are outside groups have to carry insurance. Or would the
But it's a
district,
Winooski's-
But they fall under a category 1.
Yeah, a
where
category
the
1.
majority of the participants are Winooski residents.
and
So
so
those
our
are
insurance
covered
covers
under our
all
insurance.
category 1 people?
Yeah, category 1 and 2.
I mean, these
Yeah.
are just questions I'm asking, and I think
Yeah, that's good.
they're legitimate
But I think we
questions.
can keep it to the financial piece of just making sure that outside organizations aren't using our federal ID number is where this has arisen. All
Which
this we
I
have,
believe
we've
is-
dealt with. We've already spoken to this in some of our policies, but we haven't spoken to it on the financial end of it.
As an outside organization, those groups are still gonna have comprehensive liability insurance. Whether they're attached to us or not attached to us, everybody who interacts with that organization has to have some kind of liability coverage. Right now, I think you're absolutely right. I think because of the fact that they use our number, they're affiliated with the school district, they're technically, I would say in a court of law, I'm not a lawyer, but I would say that they probably have got some coverage from the school district, which you're paying for, which the citizens are paying for.
Do you agree with that, Mary? They should have
Well,
liability
I'm
insurance?
not an attorney, so I'm
Yeah,
not
we'd
gonna,
have to-
I'm not
You know,
gonna say.
you see what I'm saying? And I agree with the whole separation thing, and I don't wanna belabor this tonight, but I think there are things that need to be more discussed with the groups
Okay, so
before
how do we move this one forward? It's not something we wanna leave on the table.
I would move that we require them to get their own EIN numbers and allow them to use ours in the process of getting theirs.
I agree with that. Yeah, but we need to get a legal opinion as to the insurance.
I would say
That
we would,
that's fine, but
That
that
could be
would
phase 2.
change the decision
yeah,
we're making.
I would say in the process of that, I agree, Jen, but in the whole
Yeah.
process of that, I think we should have the superintendent,
Ask the questions of
ask,
the legal.
ask the questions of
Right.
just the legal, the liabilities,
And
what
pass it on
happens
to the
up here,
organizations.
you know.
But I don't think the PTO or the boosters or the friends or whatever are gonna be able to afford their own insurance.
and
That's
that's-
phase
Well,
2.
Yeah.
I
But-
still wouldn't change my mind for making them
think-
get their own EIN number.
But I think what I just heard though is the activities, if they're,
If they're on the school, they are covered.
if it's a
And when are we
majority,
looking
yeah.
to turn this around? I mean, we can't say, okay, as of tomorrow, we're kicking all the
Cut off
groups
your tank.
free. We gotta,
Midnight.
or tonight, we've gotta give them a little bit of time to
What's your recommendation?
end of the fiscal year, Jim?
Oh, God, I wouldn't
No,
give
not that
them
long.
more than 60 days.
Well, then can't this wait till, next month?
Nope.
No, because
No, I would do that.
every day the school district's at risk.
Right.
I'm not saying anything's gonna happen, but
Right.
you're allowing the opportunity for the
Yeah.
risk to
Right.
develop.
So if we, do we have to make a motion on this?
Yep.
And then,
I moved that we require the groups to get their own EIN numbers
within 60 days?
within 30 days. It doesn't take long to get one.
Yeah.
I've done it overnight.
It's just their
I did it in 5
it's just their
minutes.
meeting, it's just their meeting schedule, like their meeting
You go
rotation, giving them
online
a
and
chance to
do
get
that.
together to
Well, you
meet.
remember EIN though, they're gonna have, until they get 501c3 status, they're gonna have to pay taxes.
Yeah.
That's what we're saying, right?
Getting the EIN is simple. It's getting the nonprofit status that takes them long. But here's the crazy thing with the IRS, you can't get the nonprofit status or even apply for it until you get the EIN. So that has to be done
love the
first.
federal
So,
government.
So you're really doing them a favor by forcing them to get the EIN, then they can proceed to the next level.
To make
And
a
as David
decision.
said, there are various limitations on where you fit in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the 501c has 27 categories. Okay? You can fit into one of those somewhere, and it all depends on your limitation. How much money you expect to get, how much money you pay out, how much money you contribute, how much money people contribute to you. So you can kind of fit yourself into those kind of things.
So, do we in the community that either of you guys know have some expertise that we can offer to these folks to help them navigate this
I
process?
volunteered to help.
It's not, yeah, I'm not looking
I just,
forward.
I would just hate to have the groups that have, you know, quite honestly donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to this school
Of course, yes,
district
absolutely.
over the last few decades, just be cast away
I'm-
without
See,
us giving
see-
some support in the transfer.
Right,
Yeah.
that's what we're talking about.
That,
That's what
Jay,
we're
I
doing.
don't think it's being cast away. I think it's protecting the interest of our school system.
But I
and
think
the
to set everything up,
community.
Jen, I think we owe it to them to ease this. I mean, we're not
Right,
looking, we're looking to protect the district, and I totally understand that, and you have my support, but I think in this transformation, something needs to be
Well,
done
we
to
just did
assist the
that.
groups
That's
with
what we
it.
did.
Right,
in
that's
the
what,
whole
that's
motion.
what I asked
We just
is
did
if
that.
we can get some help. So I guess, I think the proposal would be then to, have the groups that are now using the school's EIN
Mhm.
And any future
Get the-
groups.
and any future groups get their own EIN. Within, call it 45 days for the balance of a 30-day meeting, you get at least enough time to take 30 days from today to have the meeting and make a decision and get it done. So I would say within 45 days rather than potentially 30 if they had their meeting last night. And you wouldn't mind helping, offering at least some guidance to these groups, because I wouldn't know where to go.
Getting the EIN is really easy. It seems to me that what has to happen is the resolution you've got pending. If you enact that, great. Then we go back to those organizations. The situation is, look, you gotta get your own, you got permission, we'll take that EIN, we can very quickly get them the EIN. That begins to erect the wall between the district and these organizations. Then your concerns are right, but really what you're doing is you're kind of divorcing the district from these outside organizations. And really, insurance, tax filings, that becomes their problem, not yours. If they can manage it, great. If they can't manage it, that'll be too bad. But
Now, if those groups want to use the facilities like we already have, and the
They're
majority of the kids that are involved in the activities are Winooski students, then the insurance, as we have it now, they would still
Right,
be covered for those
and typically
activities.
with the middle school dance, I know Mary always went to the dances and,
There's janitor on
so
site.
there are
there's-
some staff members
Same with all the
there.
football game, all the sports games, everything that these, or like I'm thinking of boosters in particular.
Mhm.
You know, they're at all of those things, but they're still on the facilities using their stuff. So
Mhm.
So it doesn't seem, at least at the outset, that insurance to these groups would be a huge
And
issue.
Rebecca
Right.
can check in with the insurance
But-
provider.
Then that's the you can ask Viz bit too, right?
Mhm.
That's a good, I just, you know what I'm saying, guys?
So there
I
is
just-
guidance. I don't want to cast, like you said, I don't want
Right.
to cast them out, but
Yeah.
we can certainly have some expertise somewhere that can help them out.
right.
Okay.
And for all they do for us, if we can't help them out,
Right.
we're in the wrong
Right.
on that end, so. Um,
Right.
So I think it's as simple as requiring, a motion to require outside groups to get their own EIN and cease the use of the schools, period. Help is available, but we can deal with that as a.
45 days?
I think 45 days gives them 1
And
month
I'll be in
till the
touch
next
with Terry
meeting.
tomorrow.
Okay.
And I think that's at least a good starting point to push it forward. So, I'd accept the motion.
So moved.
Jay, shouldn't you, being on the boosters as close as you are?
Oh, yeah, as a matter of
You should
fact,
actually
yes.
recuse
I have to
yourself.
recuse myself, thank you.
You're welcome.
You're
Can I just-
absolutely correct.
I gotta add one more thing.
I did
Absolutely.
make a motion.
Yes, we got one on the table. Go ahead.
I know you've gotta get a time frame. What's gonna mechanically happen for these groups is they're actually gonna have to close out all the bank accounts that they have using the school's EIN. They're gonna have to set up new accounts with their new EIN. And this is volunteers, so you know, just keep thinking of that in terms of the time frame for them to perform.
Because
these
it's not,
things.
because I even think like within 60 days, it's not gonna make or break anything, to give them just more time, I mean, I think it's one of the.
Yeah.
Even if you're
I'm okay with
taking, even if you're using the school's EIN to acquire one, you'd still have to rechange it all?
They really would.
Interesting.
That's a lot of work, so let's give them some time.
Yeah, because they're all registered with the banks, with the school's EIN.
Yeah.
We gotta change all of ours.
So maybe 60 days.
Yeah, so it's just a matter of letting the bank, saying to the bank, this is our old EIN, this is our new one,
Okay.
and the banks will change it.
Oh, okay.
It's not a big, long thing. I think you're right, the first step is passing your motion saying, nobody can use our EIN anymore, right? And then everything flows from that.
And Mary, if you can let the groups know that we got help in different places.
So we said 45, or did we change it to
We're gonna go to,
60?
we're gonna go to 60
Let's go
based on
60,
changing all the
yeah.
bank accounts. Thank you for the insight. And
So there's
So-
a motion, I think you need to second it and pass it.
right. So the motion that I got on the table is to have the outside group stop using the school's EIN within 60 days. Do I have a second?
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and Jay had to recuse himself as a member of the groups.
Now, did you include in that an authorization for these groups to use the district EIN?
I did
to
in the
light them?
initial one. Did you get that, Sandy?
Well, they gave you
It
60
is.
days.
Okay, that's,
Well,
Sandy got it in the initial one. I did that in the initial.
For them to
Okay.
use our
Yes.
To
EIN
use
too.
the-
Okay, so you
Kick
got
off.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
to get their own, right. Again, it's part of the help. No, Jim, thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Jim.
All right.
And Doug, thank you, Doug.
So approvals, I would recommend that we, under 9, do B, C, and D together. Those are use of the facilities, Fletcher Allen for the parking lot, Marshall Way, and the Girls Rock Summer Camp. Any issues with having those three all in one?
I just
Approval.
have one comment about the parking lot when we go to make the motion, but
I move that we accept the approval of A, or B, C, and D,
Okay,
use facilities.
do I have a second?
One second.
And do we have more discussion?
I just have one
it's just,
question.
we give up 8 parking spaces in the front lot and not more than 8. And I think that might wanna be monitored a little bit more closely.
Jay.
Yeah. And
I think I hire you to monitor it.
that's a fair request, if they go stretch across the entire back end of the parking lot,
Make a note of that.
it's a monitoring thing that should be based on this agreement that there are 8,
I'm
we
not,
certainly need to get
I'm,
8. But
I'm gonna keep my mouth
Y-
closed.
y-
on
yeah, I
all
mean,
that.
in the
Let's
morning-
just keep moving this
in the morning, you can have 15, but on an ongoing basis, if they take up the entire back road, it may cause problems. I don't know if it's full or
I'm
not.
pretty sure
So,
everyone that comes to school uses
Um,
the front main.
we have, Amy, sorry?
I just have a question. How does the Girls Rock fit in with our summer school schedule?
We looked at the space for some of our projects and we'll be able to.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, they
Because
already
that
said
gets
they would.
pretty loud. They'd be taking up 5 or
We,
6
yeah, we
classrooms.
talked about
Thank you,
that, and
Dave.
everybody
Appreciate
felt
it.
comfortable that we could still do what we needed to do.
Okay, so I got a motion to accept 9B, the parking lot, C, Marshall Way, and D, Girls Rock. Can I have a second?
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, I did stop short of E, which is the school calendar for 2013-14. I know we had a little bit of discussion on that last year. Any discussion on the calendar as presented?
Are we still doing half day for professional development? And is it still, does it still need to be done?
Yeah.
Required by,
This is
Not
for,
Well, it's not
required.
part, it's not part
No.
of SIG, cause SIG's over, but Leon is feeling with
The-
all the
I
partnerships.
only am asking,
Yeah.
and you don't even have to give me an explanation, is because parents are,
Yeah.
from high school or middle schoolers, are really concerned that that's taking up learning time.
Yeah.
So,
and
just
if
wanna
we
make
don't
sure it's
have,
still necessary.
if we don't have, to just segue on that, Jen, so if we don't have the SIG money, how are we funding that?
It's not additional money for teachers. We're taking existing contract time and saying, instead of they're having a full day with students, half of that day is with professional development.
So we're technically shortening the school year then?
well, there's 176 days.
Well, if kids go to school till 11:30,
It's
it's
considered
considered
a
a
full day.
full day.
11, actually. If they don't come by 11, they don't consider it them here either.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
I
So that's
it's
why
a
they force
question-
them to stay till lunch.
right.
right, if you
It's
stay
a-
till lunchtime, it's considered that you put in a full day.
It's a question that I think we still need to grapple with. We absolutely need professional development time.
Absolutely.
At the same time, I think there may be some more creative ways for at least some of the students to be engaged in activities, like, I don't know, with the after-school program, if there may be some creative options. We haven't grappled with that enough, and quite honestly, it's far beyond me to grapple with it right now. But it's one of those things that I think we
Oh,
can be thinking
right.
about, right,
But because the calendar has to be approved now.
right.
Okay. Did we find any issues with it in the preview or the review as we go through? Everything has been vetted out?
For next year, kids will have off that Monday, Tuesday town meeting week, so we switched that back. So that's the only thing that's different from this year. But moving ahead, there is talk about moving toward a regional calendar, a statewide
There's a
calendar
bill.
that's gonna look very different than this
There's a
calendar.
bill on the floor right now, I believe it's, I wanna say it's a Senate bill, but it could be wrong, it could be House, but there is on a statewide calendar.
Yeah, I think it is a House bill, and they really are gonna look at still using the same number of days, but how, we split that time up could look different. It could be 6 weeks on, 2 off, 6 on, 2 off, with the whole month of July
Right.
off. But kids would go to school in June and August, so there's a lot of conversation, and it all comes back to that a lot of regression happens over summer. And if we're really serious about improving outcomes, then the current way that we structure the school calendar doesn't work for kids.
So this is what we've got going forward, if something
So
changes
this,
based on
this is next
legal
year,
requirements after that.
everybody's still doing the same type of calendar that you're looking at for next year. So it would be school year 2014-15 that this new calendar could be introduced.
And
Okay.
we're still sticking with the delayed starts, the one Wednesday
For
month
Mary,
for-
yes.
Is there a reason we don't do that just on a Monday or like a late or early dismissal on a Friday? I'm just thinking for daycare purposes,
Well, the kids can still come at normal time for breakfast,
Right.
and then they have like a big community thing they do. They do something in the gym too, don't they?
no, they go to classrooms.
I love
Okay, so based,
favorite day.
Tuesday and Thursday.
okay, so I would accept the motion to approve the 2013-14 school calendar as presented.
So moved. Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, F, I think F we want to take separately, the unit ventilators, we didn't have a recommendation at the time of the,
Yeah, there's some pretty close numbers here.
Yep.
I did a little bit of research and some talking with people.
Who have we had do the others?
Avonda Air has done all of the ones so far.
Okay.
Our
Right in the
maintenance
middle.
staff is very comfortable working with them and they know the building well. Thomas Mechanical did some work back here in the eighties. I had a conversation with them. They do quite a few schools. My concern with that is they didn't take the time to come actually look at the project, so I'm afraid their numbers might be off. Roulette also did not come look at the building. We've had them for small plumbing projects before. The problem with that one is that they want it till the 22nd of July. They're a smaller operation, so they would need more time. Speaking with the maintenance staff, our preference would be to go with Avonda. They are $3,700 more, but I don't feel I would need to ask for as big as contingency because they've been here and they came and looked at all the units beforehand. So that would be our preference to award it to Avonda Air. Eventually, we had originally set aside $64,000 in the reserve fund. I would really like to go ahead and get the whole middle school done at this point for the extra money that it is.
Is that the 11?
That would be, I would need a total, I would need about $10,000 more. What I would ask for is that we would take 75 out of the reserve fund, and then I did have some money in the general fund this year set aside to replace a couple unit ventilators, so I would spend 10 out of the regular funds for this year and ask for 75, up to 75 from the reserve fund, so I have a little buffer zone for contingency with any of those 3 lower companies.
Okay, so you're asking for 3% contingency for Avonda Air's 80K for 11 unit ventilators.
Correct.
Thoughts?
Sounds good to me.
I'm okay with going with they who have replaced all of the
Exactly,
others. I think
yes.
the
And
difference
maintenance
between
staff,
them, you know what you're getting, and the difference between them isn't huge.
No, the guys have worked well in the past together and our staff, so
So
I'd be more comfortable.
I would accept a
Overseeing that
motion to
project.
you
I
to
like the common sense.
take the bid of Avonda Air.
I motion that we use
to
Avonda
do
Air
the
with the
unit
3%.
ventilators.
So the motion I would
75.
like to request
Yep.
is up to $75,000 out of the reserve, and the balance will come out of the general fund for this year.
For the 11 unit ventilators.
Correct, in the middle school.
I motion what she just said.
Second.
Second. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Dishwasher replacement, I think this one was only 2 vendors rather than 3, and you got the approval from the state?
I only got one bid back,
Okay,
and that didn't surprise us because there's not a lot of vendors in the area that carry something like that.
okay.
So, in the event that you allow me to go ahead with this, I've already contacted the state. I've received permission to move forward with this because I did go through all the proper steps, the legal ad and seeking bids. Once again, this came in a little higher than we had originally thought it might. We had set aside $25,000 in the reserve fund. It came in at 29.2. And then I would also like to have a little bit of a contingency, so I would be asking to spend up to $32,120 to replace the dishwasher in kitchen facility over April break.
That one's completely out of the reserve fund.
That one's completely out of the reserve fund.
Okay,
That was one of the things we took out of the budget from fiscal year 14.
Right.
okay.
We're in desperate need of getting this done.
It sounded like it when you brought it forward, so. I would accept a motion to utilize $32,120 out of the reserve fund for replacement of the dishwasher.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
And then, the discussion, you got an email, and I don't wanna belabor the point, but I definitely wanted to at least bring it in here. I got an email from a community member who lived in another community that, and the comments basically are, aimed at it says, the letter that they sent it out of the Williamstown, shall the voters direct the Williamstown School Board of Directors to send the following statement to the Vermont General Assembly for consideration and action. We, the voters of Williamstown, believe that the local governance and control exist only when we have immediate, direct, and effective access to those who make and implement policy. Further is our belief that the local governance and control are vital to the education. So this is aimed at, and there's more in the letter, it's aimed at the consolidation collaboration study and pushing back. I read through this and I wanted to bring it forward for discussion. We are late, but I think the discussion that I've come around to with what we've had already is, I don't think this study is a bad thing. I think the study that we're doing will get at educational opportunities for our students that they may not otherwise have in unique and creative ways, especially in light of the partnership. And, you know, the financial piece, if there's something unique and creative, I mean, Armando mentioned food service, it can be as simple as something like that. So, I just wanted to bring it forward, no real action necessary, I don't believe, unless somebody's got a real dinger for moving it forward, but I just wanted to.
Rama is actually, I believe, on the Williamstown board.
Yep.
And I do agree with him in the one thing that he says, that it should be left up to local school districts. I don't think it should be mandated by the state.
Yep.
Although I do appreciate the state with the finances that they've put forward under both Act 153 and 156 to encourage school districts to investigate it.
Right.
But I do agree with him that it should be left up to districts and not forced upon them.
Okay. So other than, I didn't have any other actions there. Future agenda items?
Parking lot update.
And I met with, John Little and Hank, and I'm sorry, I forgot his last name, was the interim city manager, or interim city engineer, as they hire one. They've come and got our measurements, they'll be putting an RFP out, we'll get pricing back early April.
And really quickly, I have had the pleasure of coming to pick up after school, and it's a mess. And I am sorry, that is so dangerous. I am appalled. I want to get out of my car, walk to those people in the very first row that is supposed to be chain shut, or the people, the tractor trailer that came in yesterday. And so I don't know how that can be addressed, but if maybe you guys could put your heads together and look at that, because somebody's gonna get hurt.
I keep putting it in every newsletter. I've gone out and put the chain up. People come through and take the chain down. I've gone to every car that was parked there and asked them not to park there.
Park the little bus with the red lights on, and arrest anybody. No, I think the reason we put, I think the reason that we put the second row in there was for a safety lane, which is cluttered in the morning and in the evening, not necessarily just by,
It's
so I
blocked.
think.
There's empty parking spots on that new lane, but people sit right there. So I don't know if you need.
Because it's not striped.
Traffic
First of all.
control.
It is striped.
So I think
Well, the
by,
parking spaces are, but not
Right.
that,
And let them
that's
know
a
you
3-lane
cannot
road.
stop.
But
so I
You
think,
need to keep going.
yeah, so I think the agenda item we'd like to have based on that for the next meeting would be, an analysis of the use of that and the enforcement activities that are in place to keep it safe. I think it's a safety issue.
It is a safety issue.
And it needs to be addressed immediately. So if we can have a discussion at our next meeting about how that's going,
Right,
that would be.
and possibly put forward
good.
an idea about a parking lot ambassador, someone who's from,
However,
until it gets us
decides
through.
to
Yeah.
do
Well,
it.
I think we need to discuss the fact that, I mean, I know Mary, you've made an exception for Richard but, the handicapped accessible parking.
We can put the rules in place that we need to, but right now it is being completely abused and it needs to be
Oh, I understand
monitored.
that, but I'm
and filtered.
saying,
So whatever.
however we enforce,
Mhm. Understood. Yeah, but I'd like to just have that discussion when we come back in March. At this point, I would like to, I would accept a motion to move into executive session.
So moved.
In a second.
Second.
Any other discussion before we move into executive session? All those in favor? Aye.
I,
Opposed? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lots and lots of ground, little time as always.